Hey, welcome to Modern Day Hysteria. Thanks so much for coming over tonight. I am stoked. We have got bright minds here. It's going to be a blast when we talk about basically evolution more broadly. And I'm going to kick it off, just going right down the list by first asking Mr. Christopher Boyer to talk about his YouTube channel, what he's doing over there. Want to encourage you, even if you don't agree with any of the people that are speaking tonight, please go check out their channel. Then you at least have the best a representation of their views that you're going to get straight from them. So Christopher Boyer, thanks for coming on. Please tell us what you've been doing over at your channel.
Yeah, sure. First off, thanks for having me, James. I appreciate it. My name's Chris Boyer. You can find me on YouTube just by typing in my name, Chris Boyer. It's pretty easy to find me on there, but my channel is pretty much aimed at defending Christianity, which is also known as Christian apologetics. So my content really focuses on that. So if you have any interest in, videos or content along those lines, feel free to stop by and check it out.
Rad. Thanks so much. Next, we have another Christopher. Christopher, I'm stoked to have you back. I specifically invited Christopher because we had a conversation just a couple nights ago, and he impressed me so much with his discussion on the evolutionary debunking arguments. I was like, oh, we got to have him back on, and I think he'll give his case well tonight. So Christopher, if you want to share what is going on at your channel, if I remember, it's Biblical
History Skeptics.
Biblical History Skeptics. Thanks so much.
So what's going on right now is I just released a video going over the composition and theories on how the book of Job was formed. I've also tomorrow I will be uploading with my friend Brian another one of our atheist Bible reading commentaries, and after that I'm mostly just going to be floating around other channels. Next week I'll be on Milwaukee Atheists.
Awesome. Glad you're here. And last but not least, we have Steve McRae. I'm very excited to have you, Steve. If you want to share about what's going on at your channel, whether it be the Great Debate Community or Steve McRae Incorporated.
I'm incorporated now. I'm at the big time. Well, you know what? We might actually have an LLC, but that's a long story. I'm Steve McRae. I'm from the NonSequitur show, along with my partner Kyle. We do debates, discussions, dumpster fires. We specialize on dumpster fires. If you want to see the worst of the worst and things you will never see anywhere else, and have people try to argue things you'll never hear anywhere else, come to see the NonSequitur show. And I also have my own channel, Steve McRae, where I kind of do after shows and just kind of, impromptu hangouts. And I also have a Great Debate Community channel, which is kind of defunct now, but it's still there. It has some pretty decent videos on it. It has one with Aaron Raw people can go check out. But yeah, thanks for being. I'm really thrilled to be here, man. Thanks for inviting me.
And when he says his partner Kyle, he means his partner.
Yeah,
thanks for
clearly that's the case, because yes, people question my sexuality often for whatever reason.
Well, we're glad to have you here. Absolutely. So I am stoked. I got to just open it with something that I thought was, I would have to say I was impressed. I have to give credit where it's due, is that on Twitter, Steve McRae, you were willing to kick against the goads. And by that, I mean a discussion on the definition of atheism came up. And Steve McRae, you were willing to say, no. The academic definition, the scholarly definition from those people who specialize in this topic the most, philosophers, would be that atheism is an explicit rejection of God's existence, not just a lack of belief. And first of all, I mean, there are just so few atheists that take that position. I don't know why that is, because Steve, that's the thing. I've been saying this, I've been roughly the same argument, although you have way more sources than I do to back it up, which is impressive, is that I've been saying, if we're going to go with any definition, why not go with the scholarly definition? And Steve McRae, you basically shared a dozen sources from scholars, not just theists, but atheist philosophers who are saying atheism is the denial of God's existence. So Steve, thanks for being so willing to go against the grain, even if you're disagreeing with your own peeps.
Well, first of all, I mean, I'm agnostic, so I don't have allegiance to theist or atheist, right? I mean, but it's the truth, right? It's a fact. If people purport that they're going to have these conversations and that they're going to ignore what the facts are, then Are they really having a conversation? So, I mean, it is the fact. Chris knows it. Anybody who ever goes and looks into this stuff, it's the way it is. I am well sourced because I am well researched on it. And plus, not only are my sources just sources, I've actually spoken to most of my sources personally, right? I've had many of them on my channel, people that have written peer review papers. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things that if people want to argue against that, I think they're just basically tilting at windmills at this point. I don't know what else to be said on it. I mean, you're exactly right in what you said. It is the philosophical definition. What are you going to do?
Yeah, and go, Christopher. Do you have something?
Oh, I was just gonna say, at this point, I agree with Steve, and now I just provide him with fodder online. So like, here's a guy that doesn't think that that's the definition of atheism. Steve, it's gonna dumpster fire going.
Well, I want to clarify first two things. If I may, I'll only take 30 seconds. One, I realize there's colloquial definitions. You want to use those, be my guest. There's arguments to be had against them. I'm not arguing that you can't be an atheist by colloquial definition. Never have, never will. And the other thing is I want to apologize to Chris because in the group that I had posted this video to, I had told them I'm going into this blind. I didn't know who you were. I remember who you are now. You know, we didn't have much of a conversation before, but I have to like clarify that because I do like to be factual. And so I am not going as blind as I thought I was, although I still have no idea what the hell I'm doing here. Fair enough?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Sounds good. I agree.
It's basically another day on the Non-Sequitur show.
What can go wrong?
Right. So, but I do want to ask if I can. I mean, I think it's pretty clear, you know, if I'm defending Christianity, for the record, I didn't say it, but yeah, I am a Christian theist, obviously. Steve, you said you're agnostic. I know, James, you're a Christian theist, and Christopher, I don't know where you fall.
Also on the agnostic spectrum.
Okay, sounds good.
Rad. So, discussing evolution, we agreed beforehand we were not going to debate. First, we wanted to be more of a discussion, so we're trying to bring new ideas to the table. And second of all, in addition to it not being a debate, more of a discussion, we also were not going to debate whether or not evolution actually happened in the sense of single-celled organisms bringing about the diversity of life we have today. Instead, I suggested at least one of the things we talk about, and I'm open to other ideas, but I can't help it. I've been obsessed with the evolutionary debunking arguments of objective morality. And I'm willing to summarize it unless somebody else has a summary that they think would maybe even be clearer than mine. Otherwise, I'll let her rip really quick and try to give like a 1-minute explanation. Cool, I'll go for it. So, theists like Chris Boyer and I, see, look at Chris Boyer over there, proud. We would be happy to use the moral argument. And I mean, at least I would. I think you would, Chris, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, excellent. So, the skeptic might say, okay, great. If you want to use this moral argument, I've got a problem. Because I agree with you that it seems to be, you know, it seems inside here, my moral experience of the world seems to indicate that there is something deeper to the world. In other words, that there seems to be this like moral essence to some things in the world. Some things seem right or wrong. And they might say, but you know what? Maybe it's not that my cognitive faculties are tracking these objective moral values. Maybe it's just that I evolved in such a way as to think that these particular behaviors that help pass on genes, or at least increase the probability that those particular behaviors, I think they're right or wrong, because had I not, I would not have been as likely to pass on my genes. So for example, an obvious one would, most of us think we have a feeling that suicide is immoral. And if we do, that kind of makes sense, because if you didn't have that feeling, that would be one less thing keeping you from killing yourself and not being able to pass your genes on, right? So that's the most obvious example. Another one might be, I have a feeling that murder, killing another person unjustifiedly, would be wrong. It has this moral essence, this I ought not do it. And if I did do it in the tribal days, odds are good I'm going to get killed, because somebody's going to take vengeance and I'm going to be killed or cast out of the tribe. So now I can't pass on my genes. So the idea is, a skeptic might say, the moral perceptions we think we're experiencing aren't just explained by the possibility that we're actually tracking these objective moral truths out there. It might just be easily explained by evolution, namely that we wouldn't have passed our genes on, or at least the odds would have been much smaller had we not had these alleged moral perceptions of the world. And in that case, it undermines the moral argument, because the moral argument is trying to say, hey, agree with me, we have these moral perceptions. We have a good reason to think there's objective morality. And of course, the person arguing for the moral argument would say, they try to take that and also reason from that, as well as with another premise, to God's existence. Now we're not going to cover that, but we're covering the first part. Maybe evolution can explain our moral experiences of the world. And in that case, it seems like we maybe shouldn't trust them as much as we do with regard to whether or not they're actually picking up on objective moral truths up there. So hopefully I haven't beaten it too much.
Well, if I could just like jump right in for a minute, there's a lot to unpack there. I don't even know where to begin, because there's just so many things that I'm not saying that you have an incorrect perspective of these things, but I think you're throwing a lot of things into the blender and just kind of turning it on. And the reason I say that is, if you're going to have these conversations, in my opinion, you first got to really kind of narrow down what people mean by objective morality, because I think people really do confuse meta-ethics with normative ethics. Agreed. And just because, and I know you have a background in philosophy, so please let me know if you agree and disagree with me on this. When people talk about objective morality, all that's saying is that they believe that a moral fact is something that's not contingent upon a human mind, as opposed to a subjectivist. It doesn't mean anything else other than that. There could be an objective moral framework. That's obviously, the rules of chess are objective, right? That does require a mind of God, right? And even though it comes from a mind, somebody created those rules, it's still objectively the case. So objective morality is just that the perspective of the individual is that, yes, moral facts exist, just like a subjectivist would say moral facts exist, but one is saying that it's contingent upon human minds, one say it's not contingent upon human minds. And I think the discussion really needs to be more on, do we have normative ethics from evolution? I don't think objective morality and subjective morality have anything to do with evolution, to be honest. Why would they? Where we get our normativity from, as in what we would do in a given situation, that's what I think would be something that would become from evolutionary history.
Right. That's more what I was arguing last time, because I didn't think that you could really derive a moral framework from it. Yeah, from evolution. It more just explains why we behave the way we behave.
Right. I mean, granted, Harris will take the objective approach and say there's an objective moral framework from harms and benefits, which would come from an evolutionary thing. That's a framework, and I get that. But if we could dive into the concept that you were talking about modern day, and then maybe Chris can chime in. If you're going to suggest that objective morality requires a deity of some kind, right? Because clearly it doesn't. I hope you agree with that, because Sam Harris posited objective morality, and Richard Carrier affirms it. He agrees with it. But the problem with positing a deity is that it only gets you to ethical subjectivism, in my opinion, right? Because it's contingent upon his beliefs. And even it's the case that is subjective, how does that really affect our normativity? And I don't know how that has any effect on evolution. I mean, you can posit all you want that it requires a deity, but it's very similar to the argument from contingency. Just by positing a deity to say the argument from contingency satisfies the principle of sufficient reason doesn't actually get you anywhere. It doesn't actually solve the problem of the principle of sufficient reason, or at least satisfy it. So I'm asking you, one of you gentlemen, tell me why, one, you think objective morality is the case. By the way, I'm not an objective morality person. I don't deny it. It can possibly exist. I'm fine with it. I'm more a nihilist. I'm an error theory more person. But why do you think objective morality exists? And if it does, how does that metaphysically necessitate the need for deity?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm going to turn it over to Chris in a sec. I just want to make sure that I clear my own initial explanation, because I think I might have accidentally led some astray. My concern was more about whether or not, so Sharon Street is a philosopher, she's at NYU, And she's given these evolutionary debunking arguments, trying to argue that evolution gives this reason for, you could say, doubting our moral perceptions of the world. Namely, so I mean, we're in the same boat, Steve, that I'm trying to say that she might have a good, sound argument against the moral argument. Namely, she might be saying, hey, we don't have a good reason to believe in objective moral truths. Though the whole idea of, like, theoretically granting we had objective morality, do we get a God out of that? That's like a different issue that I wasn't planning on going into, because we talked about discussing evolution tonight. But if you guys want to, I'm open to it. I just wanted to see if you were impressed by the debunking arguments. But hopefully we'll get back to that, because I want to be able to hear Chris.
I mean,
talk.
I'm willing to concede objective morality. So you want to be arguing with me on that? Because I mean, I don't, like I said, I don't really have a dog in that fight. Sure, objective morality exists. They're great. I don't really affirm that because of error theory, but I have no problem with people having an objective moral framework at all.
Gotcha. Okay, Chris, I want to hear your thoughts. I haven't.
Yeah. Well, just a couple real brief, like Steve said. I mean, there was quite a bit to unpack there, and I feel like we kind of jumped around a little bit with a few different things. But a couple of things that stick out to me that I will say is I agree with Steve in the sense that you don't have to be a theist, or you don't need a deity, rather, to adhere to an objective moral framework. I get that. I agree with that 100%. Now, there's a separate argument there that I think that you would have a grounding problem with, as a objective moral realist from an atheistic perspective. You get into like moral Platonism and that sort of thing. I think we could argue which, if everybody's willing to concede, first off, that objective morality is true, which I don't think anybody here is willing to do that quite yet. I mean, I personally think that objective morality is true, and I can give reasons for that without positing a deity, if you'd like. But I think that the moral argument for God's existence is a better argument than any atheistic objective morality that I've seen. So I would say that there's a grounding problem, and I think the theist does have the advantage there to ground the good, because that's what we're talking about. Is we're talking about good. We're talking about objective moral truths, and that which is good and right and wrong, good and bad. So I think that we can ground that in a necessary, being such as God. But once again, that's a separate argument. But as far as evolution's concerned, I don't even think that if evolution is true, I think that we're going to have a problem at holding to an objective moral framework anyway. And the reason I say that is because if evolution is true, then morals aren't necessarily true or false or right or wrong or good or bad. They're aimed at survival. There may not be any truth value to those things. It's more aimed at survival. So I don't think that if evolution were true, I think it's going to be even more difficult, if you do believe in objective morals, to really hold that framework. I think that if you do believe in objective morality, the Christian theist, I think, well, let me not say just the Christian theist, but the theist, I think is going to have an advantage as far as that's concerned. But I don't think that, like Steve said, he doesn't believe in objective morals. He's kind of agnostic to it and open to it, but doesn't really hold to objective morality. Isn't that correct, Steve?
Yeah, but you know why? Because if the objective morality exists, has no influence on normativity. It makes no difference to me whatsoever. It's just a framework.
Well, what do you mean by normativity?
What we do in ethical situation. Normative ethics deals with why we do what it means to do something right or wrong. If I say it is wrong to do this, and I appeal to consequentialism, if I appeal to deontology, if I appeal to something normative, those are normative ethical positions, right? So I rather, talk about, well, what makes a person moral? If they do this, is that a moral action? I don't care if the moral fact happens to be objective or subjective. That's a completely irrelevant to me. I don't think it's really a factor in my life at all, right? That's just a framework, because like it's like saying 1 + 1 = 2 is an objective fact because it's based upon axioms. So if I choose those specific axioms I want to start with, I can build an objective framework such as 1 + 1 = 2. I think you could do that just as well with morals. I think that Sam Harris does that. So what? Yes, there's grounding problems, and I do agree with you with that. There's clearly always a metaphysical grounding issue when you have objective morality, but those are easily
where do we even kick off a conversation about morality? If I were to ask you, Steve, that is it objectively wrong to molest children, you would say that it's not, correct?
Well, I would say from a normative point of view, I think it's, I mean, you can appeal to like moral absolutism or moral universalism. Again, when we're saying something's right or wrong, in that case, when we're talking about objective morality, we're talking about a propositional value.
And that's what I'm talking about.
Right. But we're saying, is the proposition true or false? If you take away the propositional aspect, if you're not looking at it propositionally, you can appeal to normative ethics and say, yeah, it's always wrong to molest a child. Sure. But that has nothing to do with objectivity or subjectivity when we're talking about the evaluation of a proposition. If you have a cognitivist point of view on it, right? A moral non-cognitivist would say that the proposition doesn't really express beliefs. So we're assuming that it is a moral cognitivist position, which means it's propositional. So I think it's just not really, to me, important to a conversation about what somebody's going to do in an ethical situation. And I honestly think it has very little to do with evolution, because evolution is, I mean, sure, there's some moral arguments to be had there, but the downfall or the rise of evolution is based upon biology. You're never going to disprove evolution by a moral thing. It's just not going to happen. You have to falsify evolution by biology. And we know it's a fact. Evolution happens. We know it goes back 4 billion years. That's not anything that's in contention. That's nothing disputable about that. That is a scientific fact. If anybody thinks they can falsify that, more power to them. But until then, it's a scientific fact. And I treat it as a scientific fact. Same with the shape of the earth. It is a scientific fact. The earth is round. If you think it's not, you think it's falsifiable, it is falsifiable. But if you think you can falsify it, be my guest. But until you do, it stands as a scientific fact. That is how I approach these conversations.
Well, the problem is that we need to define terms if we're going to be talking about these types of things. And I actually did a video on my channel called Evolution as a Belief, because I define evolution in the way that I hear it being used in these type of debates and these type of circles. And when you say it's a fact, when I hear people say that it's a fact, and then they go on talking about, Darwinism, basically, when we're talking about, genetic mutation and natural selection, if you're assuming those things in the word evolution as fact, then you are wrong, because that is not a fact. That is not universal among scientists. So we need to define our terms first. When you say evolution is a fact, what do you mean by evolution?
Well, I say that, I say that kind of tongue in cheek, because you can't, a noun can't be a fact, right? We don't say chair is fact. We don't say TV is fact. What a fact is something generally relating to what's called the correspondence theory of truth, such that a fact is what ontologically relates something to reality, to a proposition. So if I say something is true, then there has to be a corresponding fact for it to go along with it. So if I say evolution is a fact, it's not really properly grammatically correct. I should be saying evolution is observed, and that goes back billions of years. That is a scientific fact. Now, first of all, I'm not a Darwinist. So you use the word Darwinism. I don't know any Darwinists. And I asked somebody the other day who claimed they knew Darwinist. Great. If you know one, introduce me. I am putting this out there to anybody. If anybody knows an actual Darwinist, get them to my channel. I want to have a conversation with them. I'm 48 years old. I don't think I've ever met one. So you know I'm not a Darwinist, right?
Who you talking to me?
Yes.
No, I don't.
Okay. I've never met a Darwinist. Do you know any?
Personally, no.
Okay.
But I
don't think there are any, to be honest with you.
Well, no, there are. I mean,
it's the 21st century.
Look, man, you can go to the comment section of my YouTube videos, and it's all over the place. People,
and they say they're Darwinists.
They are appealing to natural selection and genetics.
That's not Darwinism.
Yes, it is Darwinism.
No, it's
Have you read The Origin of Species?
Did you? Yeah, that's a good question, actually. Did you read Origin of Species?
I haven't read it all. No.
Okay, I would highly recommend it.
Yeah.
It's Darwinism is outdated. Darwinism is wrong. Okay. We know
Just about
Darwinism.
everything in there's wrong.
Yeah, it has a lot of what we know now to be an error, but at the time it was really good and it was the foundation, right? Just like any other thing in science, science builds upon precepts. But we know now that that natural selection is not the only thing that drives evolutionary processes. So Darwinism is literally the theory of evolution by natural selection. We don't go by that. We have modern evolutionary synthesis. So right there, I think you have a straw man argument because you're arguing a theory that has been defunct.
I'm simply saying that if you define evolution as Darwinism, like I see it being done in these types of,
I don't know anybody.
Listen, go to my. Well, you don't have to, but it's
Okay.
all over my. It's all over my videos all the time.
Well, I don't do it. Chris doesn't do it. RJ
and that I think that's a wise position on your part.
Okay.
And I want to add that I think the vast majority of people who throw Darwin's name around, A, haven't read The Origin of Species, and B, have no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah, and by the way, I'm not a neo-Darwinist either. Whatever. I don't care if somebody calls themselves a neo-Darwinist. I don't know what they mean by it, but a true neo-Darwinist, I think, is out.
The point I was trying to make is that I think there's a lot of confusion and a lot of misunderstanding around these terms. And that's why I think these terms need to be defined.
Okay, well, like a fact. You asked for a definition for a fact, right?
Well, I said, what's your definition of evolution?
Okay, so you don't want to know what a fact would be?
Well,
I give you a definition of evolution.
Well, yeah, you can do that. That's fine.
Evolution is a change of allelic frequency or heritable traits from one generation to the next generation over time. A fact, I usually just basically give something that is repeatable, demonstrable, evidential, and that has been consistently demonstrated time and time again with reliability. The scientific facts, for example, are provisional. They're alternative. Scientific facts can change, but it's the best knowledge we have at the time. So if I say something is along the lines of that evolution goes back 4 billion years as a fact, that's based upon all the evidence from science. It holds until somebody can falsify that. That is a fact. Just because somebody doesn't like that doesn't mean it's not a scientific fact, because science holds that to be a fact.
Hold on. You said evolution goes back 4 billion years.
3.9 billion years or so.
Yeah, right. Exactly. That's where life basically goes back to. But what do you mean by evolution exactly?
He just defined it as a change of allele frequencies in a population over time.
So you are assuming a single common ancestor for all life.
I don't assume that. That's actually a conclusion.
We can genetically prove it.
No, you can't genetically prove it.
Well,
okay. What is your genetic relationship with a chimpanzee? What's the percentage?
It's like 99.9%.
Sure. Yep. And what's your relationship with a banana?
Like 60%.
Well, that means you're still related.
No,
it
doesn't.
does.
Well, hang on.
It doesn't at all.
We're that's common ancestry more than evolution. I think people conflate the two very often, right? The modern evolutionary synthesis does involve descent with modification, but when we say evolution goes back 3.9 billion years, that's just a reasonable inductive inference, right? Because if I say, hey, you and I are related somewhere down the line, you agree with that, right? We have some common ancestor.
Yeah.
Right. So what makes that causal chain stop? There is nothing you can think of that says that causal chain has to stop. There's nothing in genetics that says that, right? There's nothing in biology. And we actually found that are 3.9 billion years old, like stromatolites.
Okay. So that basically means that life basically came about at least 4 billion years ago from what we can see.
How did it get from that to what we did?
Exactly. That's precisely the question. That's what evolution is.
Yeah. If a population has a event that changes the allelic frequency, it's now evolved. Every population on Earth, every one of them right now, is evolved every time there's a reproductive event.
You have
around 60 to 100. No, we're not assuming
based on similarity. Yes, you are. You are, because you don't know anything about 4 billion years ago. You haven't observed anything.
You don't have
looked at
really all I got. Okay,
listen, can I say something? Can I say something real quick? You're looking at the similarities in the genetic code. That's what you're doing, and you're making an inference, assuming a single common ancestor produced all of this life that we have.
Okay,
that's what you're doing, just because of similarities, and that's just as much flawed is me saying that, you know, if Apple makes a, you know, a Macintosh computer, and they also make a laptop, the information in their manuals might be very similar. They might have similar parts. They might have similar keyboards and screens and you know, hard drives. But that does not mean by any stretch of the imagination that one evolved from the other.
Okay.
False equivalent.
So just because you see similarities in genetic information,
I think you have
Okay.
a lot of conceptions, Chris.
Yeah.
no, you are making an
Hey,
assumption.
if
that
I could add, now, if I could rebut, that'd be nice. So, number one, false equivalency.
Mhm.
Man-made objects are not organic evolving organisms.
Mhm.
Number two, I can prove to you right now that every single person on this earth is evolving. And you want to know how I do it?
Well,
I
hang
can
on,
just I can just show you the genetic differences between you and your parents.
I'm not going to let you embarrass yourself. Like, humans can't evolve. An individual human doesn't evolve.
No, I'm saying
Population.
between you and your parents, you are going to have 60 to 100 genetic anomalies between
Yes.
you and your parents.
Yes.
That is a change in allele frequencies in a population.
Yes. So the population has evolved, not the individual.
I need to specify the population, but
Exactly true.
yeah, we can prove that right now genetically. I can also show to you that just by comparing fossils and remains of humans, that we are losing the 5th toe on our foot, our pinky toe.
And one thing you got to remember, Chris, is that when we look at something, we look at an overall evidential thing, right? There's a consilience between many different branches of science. Okay, it's not just one branch that says this. It is every branch of science that can deal with this issue all has the same findings. There's nothing that stands out in any branch of science that says this is an anomaly. How can this be? Evolution, proteomics, comparative homologies, comparative anatomy, comparative homologies, comparative. When you're looking at things like the Gulop pseudogene, when you're looking at things like ERVs, when you're looking at any kind of genetic or physical traits, they all show exactly what evolution would predict. The evidence is overwhelming. You can't just say, well,
no, the
you
evidence is
don't.
not
Let me finish. You can't just say you're assuming. These are a conclusion. If you were investigating a crime scene and a guy has a bullet in his head, a guy standing with a gun, fingerprints on it, trajectory, ballistics, video, eyewitnesses, and you're sitting there going, you're just making assumptions. That is what people listening in hear when you say things like that. They literally hear you making the same silly argument as somebody was saying, well, yeah, you're just watching video. Oh, you just have, ballistics. Oh, you just have forensics. Oh, you just have, fingerprints and DNA analysis and eyewitnesses. It's just, you're making assumptions. No, there are thousands and thousands and millions of papers written and evidence that support the theory of evolution, even more than the theory of gravity.
You need to define your terms. If you're gonna say just evolution, look, if you're just gonna say evolution, we're gonna get nowhere with this conversation.
Which term would you like to find?
Because I will tell you that you said that it is. Would you say that it is a fact? Would you say that it is a scientific fact, universally held among all scientists, that 4 billion years ago we all evolved from a single common ancestor?
I would say that it's universally held among the overwhelming vast majority, around 99.7% of all the world's scientists, especially relating to the biological sciences.
Okay, so they believe that. That's fine. But would they say that that is factual?
Yes.
No, they would not.
I
could get to you.
Really?
I could get to you the doctor. I could get to you Dr. Mary Schweitzer, who's a Christian biologist, and she would tell you that.
I've had Dr. Mary.
That's fine.
I've had Dr. Mary Schweitzer on my channel, by the way. But listen to this carefully. If I did a random sampling of biologists, and I know how many PhDs in biology, right? If I asked a random sampling of them, I guarantee it's going to be around 99%. Okay, I only know. I don't even. In fact, I don't even know anybody that would disagree besides one MD who happens to be a young Earth creationist, right? If you're a young Earth creationist, you're going to disagree. But anybody who's not a young Earth creationist, I've never met one that disagrees with the fact that we've been around for, population's been evolving for 4 billion years or so. That is ubiquitous.
And we have one of the greatest fossil records, especially for human evolution, for the last 3 million years.
Yeah.
We have so many links between us and our ancestors that at this point it's irrefutable, especially because several of our ancestors we have DNA remains from. And our cousin species, Homo neanderthalensis, we have its entire genome coded and can prove that they are a different species of Homo.
We know when they died out. We know when they've diverged from us. We know that there's still some of their DNA still left in us. In some people, it's a little bit of percentage. We know all that. We have even lineages that go back hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years, right? We go to Homo erastus, we go to Homo heidelbergensis, Homo neanderthalis, like you said. We know these things. These are not something that's contentious among science. So the argument then goes to, look at, if you want to argue that evolution is wrong, knock yourself out. You're not going to convince anybody doing this. Write your paper, falsify it, get famous, because all you're doing is basically kicking against the pricks here and tilting at windmills, especially because I don't think, Chris, that you are familiar enough with the topic to even really try to invalidate it. And if you want a definition for something, because we want to get back to this earlier, what words am I using that you think needs to be more adequately defined? Because I'm happy to do that. By the way, welcome, Jackson. You're late.
Well, first off,
Jackson,
the definition that you gave about evolution being a fact, I agree with. I have no problem with that. But Francisco, and this is part of my video that I did on evolution as a belief. Do you know who Francisco Ayala is?
No.
Okay, he's an evolutionary biologist. He says that evolution can mean at least 3 different things. The first one was basically the definition that you gave. The second one was reconstruction of evolutionary history, which is what you're trying to assume because of the genetic similarities that we all came from the single common ancestor. And then 3, which is what would be known as Darwinism. So that's an evolutionary biology.
So you're saying
what I'm saying is one is a fact. The way that you described it is a fact. The way that you first defined it is a fact. Single common ancestor is not. And Darwinism especially is not.
Okay, let's talk about those individually. First of all words are mostly polysemous. They have multiple meanings. In the context of biology, right? Evolution is the first thing that I told you. That's what it means ubiquitously. Now, if somebody wants to use that term in other ways, they're allowed to, right? There's many words. Like I use the word agnostic. Agnosticism, agnostic is polysemous too. It's going to be used outside the realm of philosophy into other things. Words have different meanings in different contexts. We all agree upon that, okay? But when you're saying something like the lines of common ancestry to Luca, that is not contested in science. Right? There's nothing in science that contests the fact that there has been some type of original population, because Luca is not a single organism. Luca is a population. The last common ancestor is a population. They don't know what that population was. They don't know if it was eukaryotic, prokaryotic. They don't know a lot of things about it. But they know that something has to go back at least that far. And it might be a little bit hazy because of horizontal gene transfer and the fact that the tree gets a little bit more bushy. But it still doesn't negate the 3.8 billion years afterwards we have a great record of.
Nor does it negate our fossil record, phylogenetics, and
exactly.
I'd say about 500 other different fields of specialized biology that all back it up.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so this is all I'm going to say. The way that you defined evolution, it's honestly, it's harmless. And I think everybody, even young Earth creationists, would agree with that definition of evolution. But maybe you're using it that way here. But most of the time when I talk to people, they do not use it that way. They use Darwin's.
I'm sorry, since I was late. Can you reiterate your definition for me?
Yes, Steve, go ahead and define it the way you did, if you would.
Now I have Jackson here. Now I'm all paranoid because he actually knows this stuff really well, right?
I'm watching you.
I hate you, dude. I hate you. Okay, so if you laugh at me, I'm going to find you. I know your IP. I define it this way. And again, this is a little bit stipulative, but it's for the most part, I define it personally as a change of allelic frequency or heritable traits in any given population from one generation, or any population of species from one generation to the next generation over time.
Sounds perfect. I agree.
Okay, so now here's the thing. I can tell you, Chris, whenever
Nobody
you go into
disagrees with that.
well, whenever
So,
you go
so
into
when you start screaming that out as a fact,
hang on.
that's
Whenever you-
harmless.
hang on,
Hey,
whenever you
Chris, let Steve finish.
whenever you go into a conversation, it really helps not to big baggage from any other conversation. Because I mean, we have thousands of conversations, literally thousands of conversations.
I don't know what you mean.
You
Well,
keep
just
bringing
said-
in all those other people that use it incorrectly and
Right.
trying to use it against us. We're not
No, I'm
them.
not. I'm
Stop
not.
bringing them up.
I'm not trying to use it against you.
Then why bring them up?
Yeah, we're
because
telling you how we're using
To be fair,
No, because you asked me a question, Steve. You said, I don't know any of them. Do you? And I see them all the time, and that's all I was simply saying.
Okay,
I
can
think
you do
there's
me
a lot of
favor?
misunderstanding.
Can you do me a favor? The next time, and I'm happy to oblige. Next time you find yourself that's advocating for Darwinism, send them my way, and I'll argue against them.
I know you
Or
will.
my way.
I know you will.
Jackson will too, probably. Jackson, you cool with that?
So,
Yes.
but if we could just move on
Sure.
from here a little bit, common ancestry is really not the major issue. I don't think. I think that the fossil record is, in my personal opinion, as I'm a layman in everything, by the way. I'm not an expert on anything. I'll just let you
Welcome
know
to
that
us.
right now. Okay. And that's fine, because I try to rely on the scholars, and you tell me I don't know what I'm talking about. I haven't looked into it, but I
I'm not
go
a scholar.
with
I'm a
I go with
layperson,
what
dude.
I see the scholars that are experts in this. That's what I look at. Basically, I think the fossil record is decidedly against common ancestry,
False.
and
I'm
so,
sorry. That's
so that's where my biggest hesitation is going to come from.
so. Can I ask you a question? Or
Yeah.
so I can ask you one more question. Then can I ask you a question? Are you
Yeah.
familiar, for instance, with the reptile mammal transition?
Yes.
Have you read any technical literature on it?
Well, I don't know what you mean by technical exactly, but I
So
have.
if you were to go to
Scholarly
Google
scholarly
for
material.
instance, yeah, if you were to go to Google Scholar, for instance, would there be any papers on there you have in fact looked at regarding the reptile mammal transition?
What was the source that you said? I didn't catch that.
I said if you were to go to Google Scholar, for instance, or PubMed or some place that has a wealth of technical literature.
Just go to RJ Downard's tip thing. That's all you need to do. He's got.
Yeah. So if
Nobody
are there
knows
any
it.
places-
Nobody knows it better than RJ.
That's true. Are there any
Yeah.
places that you have read technical literature on this topic or any other topic in paleontology? And if so, what papers have you read on paleontology in the technical literature?
And from which scholars?
Yeah,
I mean, not even which scholars. I'm not even really worried about the specific names like Gingrich or whoever. Just what papers have you looked at?
I mean, I haven't really looked at papers per se. I've seen interviews with Lynn Margulis. I've seen some of William Lane Craig's criticisms on evolution, maybe some Plantinga's, but they're
William Lane
Christians.
Craig is not a technical
No,
scientist.
I know.
Paleontologist.
That's what I just said.
Plantiga.
But-
Okay, I'm sorry. It's
But
breaking.
I know these are Christian philosophers. I don't consider myself an expert on evolution. I just said that. I don't really study evolution
Okay.
per se.
All right.
But I am familiar with what you would refer to as the reptile to bird transition.
Can I say
Or
something?
the-
No,
Archaeopteryx.
it's a reptile to mammal transition.
Reptile mammal.
Oh, I didn't catch that. I thought you said bird.
I think it was like around the time of like the therapsids, mammal-like reptiles and stuff.
But
No, I
let me point-
guess I'm not
let me-
familiar with that one.
Let me point something out to you, Chris. You said something that I found unique, and then I turn right back to Jackson. You said that you trust the experts. 99% of the experts agree with what we're telling you. 99%. Go do a random sampling. 99. For some reason, you think that other three standard deviations, which is 99.7, right, would be some 0.3 would be
Probably higher than that,
Look,
but yeah.
I'm
let's
not-
go.
I am being conservative here. Okay.
No, dude.
But let me finish. Let me finish, please. You're saying that you agree with you trust the scholars like that. You've never read any of the papers. Now, I have read some biological papers. I couldn't really name too many off the top of my head. I read more philosophical papers. I can tell you the names of the papers I've read off the philosophy because I've been doing that a lot more recently. But I have read some papers. I've read Mary Schweitzer's work, right? Because I had her on my channel, so I can name her papers that I've definitely read. I've read the paper on the human chromosome 2 fusion site, right? I've discussed that. If you haven't looked at the papers, you haven't really looked at the evidence. So your evidence that you're basically trying to evaluate is not primary. As I'm gonna do a throwback to RJ here, watching here. You're going to secondary redactors and third and tertiary redactors. You're not going to primary sources.
Well, I quoted. Maybe I didn't quote Lynn Margulis, but I mentioned her name. I mentioned Francisco Ayala. I'm just really not interested. I mean, James wanted to have me on to talk about this, and I'm just not interested in evolution, honestly. So I don't really research it extensively. So I'm really a layman when it comes to that. But hold on, let me finish just real quick. But I quoted Francisco Ayala. I quoted Lynn Margulis. And I'll quote Craig Venter, who actually was part of the first genome project. Even he has said that we don't have the same genetic code. There is no universal tree of life. He said that's based on old scientific studies that aren't holding up. So when you want to go around saying that 99% of scholars
no, I have to interject. You're misunderstanding what people are saying, and that's because you don't have
the fundamental.
Because
I agree.
You told me that you didn't even know who Francisco Ayala was.
But I know, I know who Craig Venter is, and I certainly know who Lynn McGarlis is, and Jackson knows exactly what you're referring to. So do I, and so does RJ. This is not a first rodeo.
Yeah. What you're referring to with Lynn Margulis is, I do agree, she's made some wonderful contributions to science, especially the endosymbiotic theory. So she does know, for instance, that there is a phylogenetic tree of life because she's aided it quite wonderfully. But she does have some kind of strange ideas regarding speciation, for instance, and the extent of her endosymbiotic theory. But just because she has these ideas by herself doesn't mean most biologists agree with her.
We want scientists to have their unique ideas. That's how science grows. There's nothing wrong with that. But Lynn is never going to say, well, is she still alive? She's dead, right? She died a while ago.
Maybe, I'm not sure.
But
I think she's still alive. I don't know.
That we don't have 3 billion years of evolutionary thing. But let me ask you this, because I think we're getting down to the science, and I don't think that's going to be your area, and I don't want to straw man you. I want to steel man you. Do you think that if you knew evolution wasn't a fact, beyond all doubt, you knew that it happened, we know that goes back 3.9 billion years.
Well, wait, hold on a second. You mind if I interrupt? I'm only just not to try to be a nuisance, Steve. So when you say we know evolution is a fact, and namely going back 3 billion years, by devolution you mean
common ancestry.
Changing. Oh, okay. So now, okay, and that's fair. I understand that. I'm not saying you can't have it mean more than one thing, but it is, to be fair to Christopher, and we'll let you go right back to your point, Steve. But in my experience, it is true that most skeptics I run into, and admittedly, you guys are more sophisticated than the average YouTube atheist, but I do think most atheists I run into, for them, the most primary definition of evolution is they would not say anything about alleles changing in populations over time. They would say they mean single-celled organisms bringing about all the diversity we have today through billions of years of change. So just to be fair, that I do think that Christopher does probably experience that. I believe in that.
I believe that he does too, but here's the two things on that. One, again, let me reiterate, I'm not an atheist. Okay. And two, I'm not here to defend somebody else's assertions. If somebody else wants to make those kind of arguments, they can do that. I'm only going to argue what I argue. I don't bring in the baggage for what anybody else had to say, because I would be here forever. But
you shouldn't ask. You shouldn't ask. Well, if I've ran into any before then.
And I'm not saying that you haven't. I'm telling you, if you find a Darwinist, you find somebody that holds to Darwinism, send them my way. I will fix them, and with Jackson's help. Right? Okay. But here's the thing, and if other people make mistakes, God bless them. We need to educate them as well. But if everything we've said is true, we know human evolution has occurred from populations from common ancestry, and we can trace that common ancestry all the way back 3.8 billion years. How does it affect your position with God? How would it?
Whoa, where did that come from? I'm not sure where that came from, but I don't think it does. I wouldn't say that evolution and God are mutually exclusive. I wouldn't even say that.
Good.
I think they're perfectly compatible.
You know what? I'm on board with you on that, Chris. Okay. I don't think there's any reason why you cannot have a evolution and a deity. There's no logical contradiction. It's called theistic evolution, right? I see no issue with it. People might argue it's kind of superfluous to add those kind of assumptions. Fair enough, but they're not logically incompatible with each other.
Yeah, correct.
Okay. Fair enough.
I do have my criticisms of theistic evolution, but there's others. There's like progressive creationism and that sort of thing. I would kind of lean more towards that way. And the reason I do is based on, and this is the point that I was trying to get back to. I mean, people like Michael Behe and Michael Denton, and they believe in, they say that they see no reason to deny common ancestry. So even they might even believe in a common ancestor. But you know, they advocate for intelligent design. So
only in some aspects.
But what I'm trying to say is common ancestry is really not the main issue. I mean, there are obviously a lot. And honestly, I think that the genetic evidence, is evidence is evidence towards common ancestry. I wouldn't say that it is conclusive by any means, but I would say that it is at least evidence.
Why is it inconclusive? I mean, I don't understand.
Well, because here's the thing, Steve. Anthropologists have not even been able to construct or come to a consensus on just the humans tree of life.
Oh, it's about
in what way?
We can't even.
It's pretty close.
We can't even do that. I can't even tell you.
Give me a specific.
Yeah,
please.
Exactly. I mean, I like to know specific too, because there might be some, you know, when it comes to like Homo habilis and hybridogenesis, they kind of change things around a little bit. You know, this little line here, this little line here. Cro-Magnon is no longer a thing. I get those. Those are minor things. But Jackson,
as far as I'm concerned, these other primates that you mentioned are just dead ends that never led to man.
Well, yeah, they're dead ends. Wait.
Hold on, except for Neanderthals. Who
wait. Time out.
Were Neanderthals humans?
Look what he just said.
I have no idea.
Yes, they're humans. Yes, Homo Neanderthals were humans. But look what you just said. They were evolutionary dead ends. Yes, they got extinct. They are
in their own.
Wait, let me finish. Because their evolution of dead ends, we did not evolve from them. Nobody says we evolved.
No, I didn't say that you did.
Well, you said that humans didn't come from them. We all agree on that, right? Humans did not come from Australopithecus.
If we share
from them.
Well, we all share a common ancestor. That's what you're saying.
Right, exactly. Okay. I want to make sure we clarify that.
We can't even trace back. Like I said, I mean, I've tried to look for research on a consensus on just human beings as far as the ancestry tree. And I can't find anything. I can't find anything. If you have
taken a class on anthropology before?
Yeah, go to Smithsonian.org. They have a real class.
My anthropology professor was actually one of the leading experts on was Australopithecine pelvises. So I think he disagrees. He and the other anthropologists he's worked with would all disagree with that statement.
Yeah, you can go to Smithsonian. They have a really good thing on the human origins.
Oh yeah, they absolutely do. It's wonderful.
Really good. Yeah.
Or just Wikipedia. Just go to Wikipedia and look at their sources.
Chris, I'm going to tell you right now, there is consensus among anthropologists and biologists.
No, there's not.
Yes, there is. Yes, there is. You denying it. You haven't. You yourself said you have not read the scholarly research.
Dude,
okay. So what? Okay,
I've looked for the literature.
Let me ask you, Chris. What is in contention? You're saying that there's not a consensus. What is in contention then? Give me something specific.
What do you mean? I mean.
What do I mean? Give me
I
something
mean,
that is specifically contentious among scientists that they have not come to a consensus with. There's a lot of things they have not come to a consensus with. I agree with that. And that's with any model. They haven't come to consensus when it comes to general theory of relativity as it relates to loop quantum gravity. Yes, big deal. What in human evolution have they not come to consensus with? And maybe Jackson, being the more expert of everyone here, he can address it. But give him something to bite into. You're just saying there's not a consensus.
No, and you're just saying that because we see these similarities in the genetic code from all the species that we've been able to discover, and we look at and that are DNA based, and we look at the similarities, that means that we've all came from a common ancestor.
If I might ask, do you know
that's what you're saying? Huh?
If I might, do you know why they think that similarities imply relatedness?
That's a great question. Why does similarity imply relatedness?
But what you go ahead and tell me.
Because evolution.
So, you ever seen the show Maury? You ever seen the show Maury?
No, not really. I don't watch a lot of TV. Sorry.
Okay, so that's all right. Maury's one of those shows. Maury's the show that is famous for saying you are the father, because they compare the genetic code of the child to that of a potential father, and they show, is this the father or not? Because we can observe directly that genes are inherited and modified and passed down through successive generations. So we can apply that idea backwards through time and show who's related to who. That's what we did with Neanderthals, for instance. That's how we know there were different species. We do that with other species, and I imagine you probably agree, like dogs and wolves are related to each other,
Right.
things like that. So bonobos and chimps are related to each other. So you just keep applying it backwards. You just keep going and going and going.
Yeah.
And
well, we know that.
I would actually go one step further than Jackson. I would actually say that evolution builds upon existing homologies and existing structures. So we can actually not just use genetics, we can use every other things relating to not just genotype, but phenotypical things as well, and proteomics to show.
And behavioral.
And behave. I mean, there's 1,000 different metrics we can use that all have, again, a consilience to show that there is a history of these populations. We can, I mean,
Correct.
first of all, do you agree that speciation occurs? I mean, do you even accept that the speciation will happen?
Yeah, I see no reason to think that.
Okay, so if speciation happens, give me a reason why speciation would have stopped if we do some aggression to it. If we go back in time, we have populations now that are extant, right? 8 million species of animal and plant species, right? Eukaryotic species out there. I think it's about 8 million, give or take, whatever. If we do regression and we say that, here's the lineage, and we keep going backwards, give me a reason why that has to hit a brick wall somewhere.
Well, when you're talking about these types of similarities between, like he gave the, I don't know, I think Jackson is his name. Gave the example
Indeed.
about you're not the father and that sort of thing. I mean, that to me is like, I mean, you're talking about between one specific kind. But
not the kinds.
Okay.
No,
my
I'm not
point in saying
talking
that,
about
my point in saying
kinds. I'm just saying,
you are
if
the
you want me
father-
to believe as an absolute fact that me and the banana share a common ancestor that goes back 4 billion years ago, you're going to have to do better than that than just looking at genetic information.
For you and a
That's
banana,
all I'm
that's
saying.
more like 2.1 billion.
Yeah, it goes back
so.
a lot. No, it's probably it's probably about a couple billion years ago, right? But here's the thing, Chris.
Well, whatever. It's.
Wait. Do you realize though?
See what I'm saying though?
You realize that you are an eukaryote, right? Do you agree that bananas are also eukaryotic?
Yes.
Okay, so if you go to time.org, timetree.org, which is a cool little site, and you type in Homo sapiens, you type in bananas, whatever the Latin word is for bananas, I think you have to do it in there, the technical thing. It'll show you the last common ancestor and where it fell in the timeline. You could do this with any two
by putting in a bunch of information into a computer system that spits it out.
Okay, let me finish. Now let me finish.
You're gonna have to do better than that.
I will if you allow me to. Neil Shubin did something very similar to this when he wanted to find a specific fossil. He wanted to have something that was transitional, like for amphibian and humans, that was relating a fish literally kind of walking out of water. That's certain specific specificities with that fossil he was looking for. He wanted to find out when the last common ancestor was to find this particular fossil with these parameters. In order to do that, you have to have a method to relate it to where you're going to find it, not just stratigraphically, not just in the geological strata, right? Because you have to know the timeline. You have to know the location too of where this population existed. So you have to know the geobiological aspect of these populations. He did this. He went to whatever the island is off of Nova Scotia. I don't remember the exact name of the town because reasons. Jackson might remember.
It was Canada. That's all it is.
Canada. Thank you, Canada. It's somewhere off Nova Scotia.
Canada.
And he found exactly what he's looking for. Not just one, but multiple ones of them. That's a predictive model. That is something that we can utilize to show if we want to make a prediction about this, this is what we would do. Now, I ask you, if evolution doesn't hold that truth, if common ancestry doesn't work that way, if we cannot see similarities that way that we can make predictions of, how did he find that fossil? If the modeling is all off.
So I'm not saying necessarily that it's all wrong. Perhaps, I don't know. What I am saying is, you gave an example of where it can be predicted and you can find something that you're looking for. But what about what we should expect to find that we haven't found? What about that? If this is
that's a great question. Actually.
If this is evidence for this theory, obviously, then what about, how is it not evidence against? When we look at our fossil record, and as far as I'm concerned, from an objective observer standpoint, unless you think that a dinosaur can, or a reptile can leave an egg and hatch into a bird or something, which I'm not.
So,
hold on. I'm not opposed to that, but I don't think that, I don't think that. Well, the fossil record is decidedly against that.
No,
I agree, because that's not what anyone expects.
Nobody expects that.
Not
no
how
scientist
that,
would say.
So actually,
that's not how
yes, it is what we would expect.
No, it's not. Okay, how about
Chris,
Michael
Denton,
Chris,
Michael
stop
Denton.
and let the guy who actually knows biology talk.
No,
So,
dude,
I'm actually glad.
it's the three of you talking here, and I'm sitting here trying to make a point, and it's almost impossible to do.
Well, because your point is nonsensical and straw man's everything we know about biology.
It's not. I've answered every
You shouldn't be.
question.
You shouldn't be saying that it doesn't when you haven't actually read the scholarly material and you've admitted to that.
I haven't read a lot of it.
Hey, Chris.
But Michael Denton's a scientist, is he not? He said for a bat and a well to share a common ancestor. He's a biochemist. He's a scientist. For a bat and a whale, which are mammals, to share a common ancestor, we would need millions of transitional forms that are not there. Darwin in his day knew that it was a problem then. It's still a problem.
Darwin,
look,
can I explain?
You guys putting your hands on your face and lifting up your arms and saying I haven't done this and I haven't done that. That doesn't
explain
anything.
Chris,
the fossil record
can see my face. I know nobody can see my face, but I didn't put my hand on my face.
Well, that's good. Good for you.
So, Chris,
I appreciate that.
So there are a number of issues there. There are a number of issues here. The primary issue is essentially the absence of evidence is evidence of absence, is kind of the first bit. Really, it's almost amazing. It's almost miraculous that we have fossils at all. I mean, the conditions under which fossils are made are pretty slim, and so that we have fossils at all is amazing, and that we.
Yeah, and I think you had a mute for a second. Let me jump on that then. We have transitional fossils. We have millions of transitional fossils, and the fact that we have as many as we do is impressive. We're never going to find all fossils because fossilization is rare. It's one of those things where you have a jigsaw puzzle, you got a pieces, you know what the picture looks like.
I'm sorry, I dropped out there.
There you
go.
We don't have millions. Maybe thousands. So I don't know about millions.
The problem is fossilization is a very rare occurrence, and even have lots and lots of transitional fossils, even among bats, believe it or not.
Jackson, you're dropping out.
Yeah, you're dropping out. By the way, we do have millions of fossils. Matter of fact, just of one fossil alone called the Nautilus, I mean, they found scores of these things.
Please, this thing keeps dropping off on me.
Yeah, you
Okay,
keep dropping out.
So even among bats, we have fossils of transitions. For instance, the earliest bat fossils we have don't show evidence of having the echolocating ability to just on a connectorus. That's one of the earliest ones, or I think that is the earliest one. And so we could live in a world where we didn't have any fossils at all, and we would still be able to draw the fact that evolution happens, that common ancestry happens from genetics alone. Now, fossils allow us to calibrate how distantly in the past the genetics forms these common ancestors, or the genetic indicates these common ancestors. And so fossil record is really this kind of extra, this whole bonus that we get. It might not exist at all, but it does. And it's a huge bonus. But if we didn't have it, that wouldn't be an argument against evolution. That wouldn't be an argument against anything. Really.
Can I screen share real quick if I may?
Well, I didn't say that, first off.
Well, you were.
No,
You're saying that
you
were saying, why isn't it an argument against evolution when we don't find transitional forms in the fossil record?
Yeah.
You were
And by the
literally
way,
saying that. So
there's one,
no, I did say that.
He asked a good question, and I'm going to steel man him. There is a fossil that we are looking for, and I'm hoping that Jackson will approve of this. We haven't found Pan Prior yet. Pan Prior is a fossil that's the last common ancestry between us and Pan troglodytes, which would be chimps. That fossil is expected to be 6 million years ago, if I'm not mistaken. We have not found that one yet. However, we have found Paralithopithecus catalonicus, which was the last common ancestor to all members of Hominidae, which is about 12 million, 13 million years ago. They found that one in Spain, and they found it not too long ago. It's been maybe a decade or so, somewhere in that ballpark. And the reason they found that, because is what I'm showing now. If modern day hysteria wants to show this is what you would ask for. How do we find the last common ancestry of whales, Cetacea, compared to a bat? You would type this into this kind of program. It'll tell you the last common ancestor was on 84 million years ago. You would go find the period of time, Mesozoic, Cretaceous, whatever the period that corresponds to. You go look in the geostrata to find that layer. And if you find a fossil with the similarities you're looking for between the bat and the whale, it is a predictive model that works. That's what scientists want to see. They want to see predictive abilities. There's a lot of effort that goes into modeling these things so people can make accurate predictions from them.
Right.
You're just throwing it away like it has no utility whatsoever.
I'm not throwing it away. But
yeah, you are.
When
he suggested you go to that website, you said it's just a computer with a bunch of information.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. You just missed it outright.
No, I didn't.
Yes, you did, and we can roll back the video later to prove it.
That's not what I was saying. You're not going to prove anything. You're talking about whales and bats and transitional forms between these. That is a triviality in comparison to what we should expect. Why?
Fossilization is a very rare occurrence.
Where are we at here?
Oh, okay. Hey, this is all you, Jackson. Take it. This is your area of expertise, buddy.
We got mammals right here. Those are all in the vertebrates.
That's a fish.
No, it says mammals underneath. Vertebrates.
I can't
fish,
read. Sorry.
Fish, mammals, and birds. So if you're going to tell me, if you're going to tell me that a mammal and another mammal shared a common ancestor, and we have transitional fossils to prove that, is a triviality. That is a triviality in comparison. Hold on. In comparison to what the paradigm on a grand scale postulates.
What are you looking for then?
And hold on. And this is all just in the animal kingdom. We're not talking about.
Wait. Then what?
We're not talking about bacteria.
What two species are you looking to find a common ancestry for?
Look, I was quoting Michael Denton, which you can discredit him as a scientist if you want, but nonetheless.
No, he's a perfectly good scientist. He's just not a paleontologist.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It
does matter. Actually,
I can find a paleontologist, and you'll say, well, he doesn't do population genetics, so he does. He can't. So it doesn't matter. Whatever I say is discredited. You've been asking me if I've read this, what my education level is, why haven't I done this? Look, I'm more than happy to read whatever you want to give me, but
I don't think you are, to be honest with you, Chris.
I have a whole channel full of information
Are
and
you
technical
serious?
literature. You can
Yeah, I'm not trying to be disparaging, but you've come to these conversations before. You haven't read any literature prior. I can send you a ton of different stuff. He can as well.
Steve, for the record, number one, I agreed to come on this discussion. It was, from what I understand, you that didn't want to debate Darwinism for whatever reason.
Because I don't, because I'm not a Darwinist.
Okay, that's fine. You wanted to have this group discussion.
I didn't set this up. Wait, I did not set this up. This was Modern Day Hysteria was nice enough to ask me, and I'm friends with him, and I'm like, sure.
He did, and I was under the impression that you wanted it to be a kind of an informal discussion as opposed to a debate. And
this is not a debate. This is not a debate. Trust me. This is not a debate. He never built it as a debate. I hope you didn't build this as a debate, because I've only had 2 debates, maybe possibly 3, if you kind of technically count the one that I had with Stated Clearly, which I don't think it was a debate. But since it's on the Non-Sequitur show, that's one of those technicalities. Was that a debate? I don't know. By the way, did you watch that? Anybody watch that?
I have.
Did you think it was okay?
Yeah.
Did I make a good
I think you did really well.
Thank you.
Okay, hold on a second. Let's come back.
That's curious.
So, I mean, well, let me just share a few things. So, just so I'm on the same page with everybody, is there Darwinism defined as the classic, the traditional definition of evolution being the result of natural selection and mutation, or is there something different?
No, there's no mutation in the theory.
Oh.
Yeah, because the Darwinism is a theory of evolution by natural selection. The natural selection was the driving force of evolution.
That's pretty much it.
Yeah, there was no ever forces.
Adaptationism, isn't that what they call it, or whatever?
There was adaptationism, and there was also evolutionism, which was in the 19th century. We don't hold any of those anymore. Right? We don't hold adaptation. Which, by the way, adaptationism is not a bad theory if you really look at it. I've looked into that. It makes sense, but we know that's not how it works, right? Science builds upon a better understanding of things.
Okay, so we at least we have that definition down, so I had misunderstood that, but I'm glad we're on the same page there. And one thing I would say that would be more persuasive. Now, I'm not saying you guys don't have the beef, but one thing is that if you say that now, and maybe I'm expecting a lot of you, because I know that this isn't like an academic. It is an academic type thing, but to an extent, it's not like you're taking like comprehensive exams or something on this. That when you say that the majority of people from this field or this field believe this, I'm not denying it. I'm open to believing it. It's an empirically testable claim. You just run the surveys, and if the methods are good, it's a settled question. But are there the sources? Is that I've heard it claimed by a lot of people, but it's like it would be more persuasive if you did have the sources. If you say the majority of anthropologists take this position, because otherwise it is kind of like, because as Christopher has said, no, they don't, and then it's like, well, now what do we do?
I do know a place you can go get some of the sources. The National Center for Science Education. They've run surveys on it.
Okay.
They're what the American Association for the Advancement of Science. They've run one, and so there are some. There are a few of them if you want to go find them. But
there's also like the Royal Science Academy or something like that in England that runs some as well. So.
Yeah. Okay. So, do you happen to know? So I'm just saying it would be more persuasive if you could match them again. That's a lot to expect, because that's like asking you to prep like you're going through comp exams or something. So, but if you do share the links, I'm willing to put those in the description. Whoever's side has links to back up what the majority believe on which side.
So
I think you could pop over to like Wikipedia also.
Well, can I not quote Michael Denton? Is that okay to do? Who has said that for a bat and a whale, which are both mammals, by the way, for a bat and a whale to have evolved from a common ancestor, there would literally be millions of transitional forms that are simply not there.
So,
let's
are you
address that.
aware
Let's
that
address
there
that.
are-
Let's address
you-
that.
And that is just within the mammals of one group of the vertebrates of one
are
kingdom, the animal kingdom, right? I mean, this
Okay,
this
let Jackson-
gigantic extrapolation
Let
that we're
Jackson
taking
address
from
this.
from the evidence that we do see on a micro scale, this to extrapolate those changes into this macro evolutionary paradigm that shares that's Luca, a common ancestor 4 billion years ago, is I'm sorry, you're going to have to do better than that.
Go ahead,
let's start
Jackson.
small. Like you said, let's start small. Let's start with just the mammals, the bat and the whale that you brought up. So are you aware that both bats and whales are Laurasiatherians?
I'm not
So
sure
bats and whales are
what that
both
means.
connected by there are studies on their retroposons and their different sections of their genome. Are you aware, for instance, that whales and hippos are sister to each other? Based on a number of different studies.
Hippo's the actual supposed to be the closest relative, I guess, to a whale.
That's what sister. Yes, that's what sister means.
Okay.
So whales and hippos are sister to each other. This is called whippomorpha, which is kind of fun to say. So, are you aware that these two, the whippomorpha, is nested within Artiodactyla, the even-hooved mammals? Again, through numerous genetic studies.
No, I don't.
Okay, so
Well, hold on. I've already conceded that the genetic evidence, I think, does point towards common ancestry.
Okay, so,
I already said that.
Well, there are also fossils. There are also fossils linking these together.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I just quoted Michael Denton with the millions of fossils between the bat and the whale that aren't there. So okay, go ahead.
To a few that actually do exist. So
go ahead.
It's not really helpful to say that there aren't millions of fossils. I mean, if there aren't, then there aren't. But we do have some we can show. For instance, all of the early whales, the Archaeocetes, such as Pakicetus and Ambulocetus, they have the inner ear structure which is unique to whales. All cetaceans have this very unique inner ear structure, but they also have the ankle structure, the astragalus, which is a bone in their ankle, which is unique to artiodactyls. So they have these characteristics which are unique to both clades, which places them in between the modern whales and the ancient artiodactyls. And so when you you look at the fossil evidence, and we've already got fossils pointing to this conclusion, which they already knew years ago. They've known for decades before we could even genetically test whales. We knew that they were related to either mesonychids, which was the old theory, or some other hooved mammal. And that has now been confirmed with genetics. So the genetics and the fossils have confirmed each other. I kind of like this instance. And so is that not really conclusive to you?
No, I don't think so.
Why not?
Well, didn't you? I'm not familiar with some of the organisms that you mentioned. As far as what did you say the archaea? What?
So these are called archaeocetes. Old whales is basically what their name means.
So is that a? Oh, so this is a whale basically.
These are early ancestors of whales that were still walking on land.
Okay. Once again, that is a triviality.
Why?
That is because this is.
If we have them, they existed. Therefore, the theory holds. I mean, how could the theory be wrong?
Because I just told you we would need millions of these.
No, we don't.
No, we don't. I think Michael Denton is
why
wrong
not?
on that.
Michael Denton
Michael
Denton A has been rejected by the vast majority of the scholarly world because his claims are so wild and bull. That's why none of his books are peer reviewed.
Yeah, and I mean, I looked into his claim on that before. I don't believe that he's correct on it by any stretch of imagination. But here's the thing.
So hold on. All right.
But he has to explain why he thinks twofold. One, that we would expect to see millions of fossils by fossilization. Fossilization is not a common occurrence. So why would he expect 1 million fossils to be had if he knows fossilization doesn't happen very often? Two, according to the phylogenetics in the molecular clocks, it doesn't add up that you would be having millions of things. So what is his primary source to make that claim?
One second.
Because
Christopher, if you want to respond to this, have that thought in mind. And then I just want to be able to, before we go into the next thing, I want to give Christopher a chance if he wants to defend Michael Behe against Christopher biblical historical skeptics objection. My only thing is I just want to, I think I'm maybe not doing a great job of trying to, sometimes it comes to the point where two from one group will give a response, and Christopher Boyer's trying to respond. And it's sometimes that there are so many objections that unless he's writing these down really fast, it's going to be hard for him to keep up with them. And so,
well, James, I like you. I think you're doing a fine job.
thanks, I appreciate it. Although at the same time, my hope is that Christopher, I'm sorry, Christopher Boyer, hopefully you feel like I'm not doing too bad of a job of letting you get to respond to each one, because we have a lot of different objections from the opposite side of Christopher Boyer. So anyway, Christopher Boyer, if you want to respond to Steve, and then also if you want to take a chance to respond to Christopher, Biblical Historical Skeptics.
Well, I don't really know what I was where I was going to go there. I forgot what I was going to say, I guess. Can you?
Well, one thing, if you don't mind me pressing back just against Christopher, because I'm like, so I get it that Michael Behe is, you might say, an oddball in a little bit in his claims.
Oh,
he might be.
He's a young Earth creationist.
No, he's a
intelligent design
idea.
advocate with a irreducible complexity
He's an
nonsense.
guy. Right.
Okay, so he's not a young Earth creationist.
No.
But the one thing is, even if, Darwin was a radical at his time, and probably a lot of scientists at Darwin's time were kind of like, let's not listen to him. So I mean, it's just not super persuasive that Michael Behe being a radical and therefore not being listened to, it's not super persuasive.
I wasn't going after Behe, I was going after Denton first.
Oh, Denton. Sorry.
Denton's, the reason that I was going after Denton is all of his claims have been rejected for a multitude of reasons, but if we're going to go with the one that Chris keeps using, which is about the bat and the whale, we have fossil evidence that proves him wrong.
Mm-hmm.
End of story. And this is one reason why his books, neither of them, he has two that I know of, have been even published in a scholarly press, because they are not scholarly work. And
right. So you asked me about scholars, and I give you scholars, and you say, well, they're not really scholars. They're no good.
I said he's a scholar, but his work is so bad that it doesn't even get published scholarly.
That's what you do. I can just dismiss everything.
Chris, how many paleontologists do you know that agree with Denton? Since that's their expertise, that's just the area of their expertise. Either cladistics, expert in cladistics or paleontology, paleontology would work too, but in phylogenetics, how many of them agree with Denton? Because Denton is not a phylogenetics expert. So how many would agree with him?
I don't know.
Well, that's what you need to look into, because that's really the case. If Mike Gardner has a PhD in astrophysics, but he's, I'm asking him about like biology or something like that, then he's not really qualified to talk about biology. He knows that landscape and he knows about astrophysics. Dennis' expertise is not in these areas. So just because you have one person who's saying these things, and I honestly have to ask you this, why do you take the anomalies? Why do you take the outliers as more validity or more reliability and more convincing to you than the entire field of science that's saying that they're wrong? That's what climate deniers do. That's what climate change deniers do.
Well, that's not anything that I've said tonight. I haven't said that. I've just given some names and some quotes that they've said that seem to me, from an objective observer, to be rather skeptical of the reigning paradigm, which is, hold on, you say Darwinism. You said Darwinism. You said no one is a Darwinist, basically.
That I know of.
We hope not anymore.
That I know of. Yeah. That I know of. Okay. I have to throw that caveat. I've never met one.
So let me just say, like I said, common ancestry is the least of the issues that I have. Even Michael Behe believes in common ancestry. I think Michael Denton does as well. So, I mean, he would be in agreement with everything that you've said so far. You're not a Darwinist.
Mm-hmm.
But so if I were to just concede the genetic evidence is in favor of common ancestry, let's just assume that is true. Okay. It's a fact, like you said. I guess my biggest issue is the fossil record. And you say we have fossils, but I just there's just simply not enough time. I mean, Darwinism, whether you like it or not, it is the best naturalistic hypothesis that
I reject
we
that.
have.
I reject
No,
Darwinism.
Okay,
That's
so tell me.
completely false.
So, okay, hold on. So tell me, hold on. So tell me, other than just assuming common ancestry and all these different species came about, how did this happen? Because Darwin explains or attempts to explain how it happened. What naturalistic explanation do you have to give to that's evidence for something to reject Darwinism?
Okay,
Genetics.
Chris, do you recognize, Chris,
Genetics?
that Darwin
Yes.
did not have access to genetics?
I
His
mean,
only Darwin. Okay, so
That's exactly it, Chris.
I have
Thank you.
already read
Genetics,
Origin of
so-
Species, and I am reading. Well, hold on, Chris. I have read Origin of Species, and I am currently about almost halfway through The Descent of Man. Darwin did not have access to a lot of things. Darwin's conception of how species changed was entirely through natural selection. That was it. There were, variations in offspring, and there was natural selection, and that was it. Everything that is like, no matter how minor it is, there's a reason, a natural reason that it, ended up this way. Nature either, or the population either needed it to be bigger or smaller, or faster or stronger, whatever. But we know that that's not the case anymore because we have things like genetic drift and gene flow. And of course, the entire field of genetics, which wasn't discovered till many years after he died.
Well, they had a kind of a conception. They had a conception, but I think the biggest issue that Darwin got wrong was he actually posited more genetics by blending rather than particulate. Right. And we know it's particulate now. And he posited blending, which, by the way, was not a bad model to have back then, especially knowing what we know about Mendelian inheritance. But he was wrong. He was completely wrong about that. He got it wrong. But we know more now, right? So I don't hold to Darwinism because Darwinism is about blending. I don't hold a blending. I hold a particulate because we have DNA.
So it'd be fair to say no one in this room is a Darwinist. None of us.
Right. So you bring up Darwinism. All you're doing is you're creating an effigy of a straw man that nobody's arguing for.
And explaining genetics is similarities in a genetic code. It's information. It doesn't say how these things came about. So I ask again, what naturalistic
I'll answer.
hypothesis do you have? You can't say genetics because that's not explaining how.
Ready?
That doesn't do it.
The fact that you have what's called recombination in your genes, the facts that you have what's called genetic drift, which is a random sampling of a population, causing things to die. You have things like called migration or gene flow. Right. You have a whole bunch of, you have also other things like epigenetics, you have evo, you have all these different things that all combine to these theories and all of these things in evolution. So when you're asking what is the mechanisms, those are the mechanisms. He even said, Jackson even told you a couple of them and you still ask, what are they? Well, he just told you what they are. It's more than just
natural.
But by the way, real quick, I'm one of those people that's going to go against the grain here. And everybody is going to like crap on me right now for this. I don't think natural selection is a great theory. I think natural selection doesn't explain much.
I agree.
Okay?
Hashtag boots.
I like you. I like you, Chris. But that doesn't mean it's wrong. Natural selection happens. You still have diversification. You still have there's 3 types of natural selection, by the way. Those all happen, right? And so natural selection occurs, but it doesn't explain a hell of a lot. I do think Photo makes a good argument on that.
So it occurs, but it doesn't create. It might maintain or eliminate, but it doesn't create.
What do you mean it doesn't create? What did you get created by? Did you get created?
Let's not even use the term create, period, in this context, because that automatically just implies design by necessity. I don't give a crap about that because and in order to create something, creation also implies a mind behind it as well.
I mean, I have that's a different argument, but I have no problem with design. The hand is designed to crypt things. It is designed by teleonomy. Matter of fact, that's one of the greatest things Darwin's ever did. Darwin actually showed that by teleonomy, that instead of teleological, that things can be designed by nature that doesn't need an intelligent agent, right? So because we have these teleonomic things that we can look at and say it has the appearance of design, it is designed. It's designed by nature. I got no problem with that. And Jackson, you seem to have no problem with that. Most biologists I know have no issue with that. So I don't want to go down those kind of roads. But when you say about created, you exist because you have a different genotype than your parents. And as Jackson astutely pointed out, you usually have about what, a 60 to 100 different unique mutations because of error correction factors and differences between your parents, because DNA doesn't really create DNA properly. It has some errors that creep in, and you have like 3 different types of error correction, and they don't even do a great job. If I remember correctly, it's like 1 error every 10 to the 6th, then 1 error every 10 to the 8th, and 1 error every 10 to the 9th. So you have a lot of DNA though. So even at 10 to the 9th, you still have mutations that creep in that are unique to you. That's it. That's why you are different.
Right.
If not, you'd be a clone.
So no, I'm not saying that natural selection doesn't happen or doesn't occur, and random mutation doesn't happen or doesn't occur. I agree that it does. We see that with the different, with the finch beaks, and the peppered moths and this sort of thing. But nothing really evolved. I mean, these things, it wasn't a new species that came about from these mechanisms. It was when the water came back, the finch beaks went back to normal and that sort of thing. So natural selection, like I said, it maintains and eliminates, but it doesn't create anything.
This is kind of strange because it seems like you're going back on what you were saying earlier about you accepting speciation.
Yeah, speciation is something different by natural selection.
No, hold on. All I was saying with that is there's different species. That's right. I mean, I don't.
How do you think the new species come about?
Exactly. That's kind of what I'm asking you guys for.
And we just gave you the processes.
No, you didn't give me the process. You said
we did.
The genetic code. No, you didn't. You didn't explain. No, look, Darwinism, there is no naturalistic explanation. You just said Darwinism is basically dead. And I agree with you. But I'm going to tell you right now, that is the best naturalistic explanation we have.
It's horrible explanation. We have genetics now. What don't you understand about that? We have genetics.
Population genetics does nothing. Does nothing. Looking at information in the DNA code, dude, are you kidding me? Like we got molecular genetics, we got ecology, biochemistry. We have all these advances.
You are aware that those have contributed to how we understand speciation events, right? Through natural processes. Right? Okay, so speciation occurs because you have a population, and if it gets divided through, say, allopatric, half of it moves to a new location. They have to adapt to a new environment, and so enough genetic differences will accrue between the original populations that eventually they will no longer be able to interbreed with each other. Thus, a new species is formed.
Okay.
So that's how do you accept things like he described you allopatric speciation, which we know occurs. Ring species is a type of allopatric speciation. Do you agree that happens?
I don't know. I mean, I would just have to take your word for it. I'm not sure.
No, don't take our word for it.
Go look it up.
Go read. Calm down. I'm gonna quote somebody else here if I can. Francisco Ayala. I'm gonna quote him again.
Sure.
And he says, I mean, I admire your guys' confidence in these mechanisms and whatnot.
But he's confident in them too, right? Francisco Ayala. He's a world-renowned evolutionary biologist.
Right. Exactly. And he's a Christian.
And
yeah,
it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter, but it matters when you give all his accolades, right? But when I say something, it doesn't matter.
What does he argue? Okay, what is it you're saying?
So I'm gonna quote him if I can. He says, unfortunately, and he's talking about common ancestry, and not the definition you gave of evolution, by the way. He's talking about common ancestry and natural selection, genetic mutation, that sort of thing. So this is what he says, and I quote, unfortunately, there is a lot to be discovered still. To reconstruct evolution history, we have to know how the mechanisms operate in detail. And we have only the vaguest idea how they operate at the genetic level, how genetic change relates to development and function. I am implying that what would be discovered would be not only details, but some major principles. Principles. Hold on. The mechanisms accounting of these changes are still going under investigation. And Steve, here's where I would agree with you, and he would agree with you, and everybody would agree on a definition of evolution. He says, the evolution of organisms is universally accepted by biological scientists, while the mechanisms of evolution are still actively investigated and are subject to debate among scientists.
Can I clarify something?
So we don't have any naturalistic explanation.
That's not what he's saying.
No, he never said we had. He did
That
not
is
say
not
we
what
had
he
none.
said. Come on.
No, I didn't say that's what he said. I didn't say that's what he said. No, I didn't say that. I'm asking you for give me the naturalistic.
Well, can I clarify something and then let Jackson, because he knows this more than I do, but I want to clarify one thing. You said something very specific. You said at the genome level, right? You said at the genes,
at the
right?
genetic level. That's what he said.
Right.
Yeah.
Natural selection, when it acts upon genetics, right? There's actually a very, and I don't know the theories behind this, but there's a very different way things are selected for when it comes to the genes, as opposed to natural selection selecting a phenotype with respect to the environment.
You're right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that you're misreading his paper, and I don't have the expertise on it to adequately explain it. I just know enough to know that when you're talking about the genomic level, it's a completely different thing than talking about the mechanisms on the phenotype, which what we're talking about. Because there is a lot of work to be had on the genetic level. That even goes back to things like epigenetics. You know, ever heard of that before?
Well, yeah, but what he said is we only have the faintest idea, or the vaguest idea rather, at the genetic level.
I agree.
But that doesn't contradict anything of what we've said so far.
So what does that mean? We need more research in that area. That's all it means. Sure.
Well,
doesn't mean it's wrong. Doesn't mean there's no non-naturalist explanation.
Well, you're saying that this genetic similarities that we see suffices to explain.
I did not say that. No, don't do that. Come on, Chris. I really hate being straw man. I said it is a consilience of many different branches of science, including comparative homologies, comparative anatomy, proteomics, ERVs, retroposons, transposons.
All right, so it's fair to
maybe it wasn't.
You have to take all these things into account, Chris. You really honestly do. Because
look. All I'm asking for is what is the explanation? What is the natural explanation?
We've given it multiple times, and you just don't accept it.
I don't think he understands it.
I do accept it. I accepted your definition. What I'm asking for is how did these changes come about? Changes between mammals?
Yes, allopatric speciation, sympatric speciation, parapatric speciation, diversifying speciation.
Hold on. Do you understand that?
Oh, don't ask if we understand. We seem to understand.
Seriously, look.
Okay, wait, guys.
You're giving me evidence for some changes that are occurring in just the mammals.
Jeez.
No, you can apply this to all across the board. You think First of all, sympatric speciation. Wait. Sympatric speciation generally happens at the bacteria level because you're dealing with changes of the chromosome number, right? So I don't even know how an animal would undergo sympatric.
Well, actually, we do have examples of sympatry in animals, like the arapaima fish, for instance.
There might be some weird examples out there, okay? But generally speaking, most animals are going to be diversified by allopatric speciation, right? Now, can you have sympatric? Sure, but you find a lot more sympatric speciation at the bacterium level, right?
Plants.
Or plants. So if you have these types of speciation that can go back all the way to the first domain, you have processes that you can say from the very first domain because of horizontal gene transfer. You can have things like whole genome duplication. You can have sympatric speciation. Now you have a mechanism by which you have a single population creating multiple different populations that have been speciated from them. Do you think that if you have a population of bacteria, and let's say it has 2n3, do you know what that means if I say 2n equals 3? If you don't, it's fine. It just means the diploid number. This means the chromosomal count is 3. Okay? And if you have another species of bacteria that has a diploid number of 2, and they mate, okay, they're going to produce 5. Now, 5 can generally not be viable because the way the mechanisms work for mitosis. But what happens is there can be an event called a whole genome duplication. And that event will cause that 5 to become 10. 10 is even. 10 is more easy to have meiosis. And the population now is 2n10 that is not viable. And so it's now valuable, but is not biologically reproductively capable of having reproduction with its prior ancestry. That's a speciation event. That is sympatric speciation. I might be butchering, by the way, this because I haven't looked at this in so freaking long. If you're a biologist, I probably fucked this up, but it's close.
Just a side note, Alcohol is good.
I need alcohol. By the way, Jackson, can you review me on that? I mean, how much I got that right and wrong? I have not looked at this stuff in ages.
On which
But
part? I mean, it sounded good from what I was listening.
St. Patrick's speciation, as far as whole genome duplication and why you could have a speciation event from there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the major.
So that's a mechanism, right? That's a way you can have from Luca on in horizontal gene transfer.
I mean, heck, we've even seen that with a species of crawfish in the past 20 years, the marbled crawfish.
Oh yeah, I remember reading that. Yes.
Virginalis, I think.
And I think it's starfish and pine trees, or excuse me, date palms. I think I've read something on that on. But let me ask you that.
So hold on. Repeat the mechanism that you said that we can get from Luca to the changes that we see in the animal kingdom. Can you repeat?
Well, there could be lots of different mechanisms.
Yeah, it's not just one. I mean, horizontal gene transfer and St. Patrick's speciation. But can I hate doing this. I really do. But for the love of God, man. If you don't know what a diploid number is, you don't know what a chromosome number is, do you really think you've done that much research? Because I guarantee it, this is stuff that we probably knew in 6th grade. So how much research could you have really done to evolution to say you don't even know what a diploid number is? And I'm not trying to demean you. I'm honest to God.
No, that's all you guys have been doing. You asked me, what have I read? You said, what education do I have?
You're refuting
no,
it.
No, I'm not. Look, I'm quoting the scholars that I have in front of me.
Argument at quote line is not a valid way to argue, dude.
No,
because you're not arguing.
Obviously, nothing I say is valid. Clearly,
no. If you don't understand what they're talking about, how can you understand what the quotes have to do with anything?
I understand that there is no naturalistic mechanism.
We just told you that. Now you're just being dishonest.
No, it doesn't. I don't think
you are literally being dishonest.
No, I'm not.
Sorry,
I don't think
you are.
Listen, Steve. Find me a scientist that will tell me exactly what you said. It went from Luca to what we have here. The mechanism. Find me anybody.
There are lots of different mechanisms.
There is no mechanism. Darwinism is the only. There is the only.
No, why do you keep coming back?
I don't know why he keeps going to Darwinism.
Because it is
Darwinism.
You've never even read The Origin of Species.
I have one question. I got to ask this, dude. If you think Darwinism is the best way that happens, can you explain to us how that works without genetics then? Go ahead. Because Darwinism doesn't have anything to do with genetics because he didn't know about genetics. He posited blending, not particulate. So if you're going to posit that Darwinism is the best explanation for this, can you tell us here how that works?
No, I say that's the only mechanism.
Okay, how does that work? What is the mechanism by Darwinism? How does Darwinism work according to you?
According to me, I just quoted Francisco Ayala, who says that it's random mutation.
No. That's not Darwinism. Darwinism. No. Darwinism did not know. Listen to me very carefully. Darwinism did not know anything about genes. How could he have natural selection on genes? Think about this carefully, Chris. I'm not trying to.
Okay, hold on. So in Darwin's day, it wasn't called genetic mutation. It was called random mutation.
A random mutation is a change of the genome, dude.
Okay, I know. And why when we found out about DNA and genetics and that sort of thing, it did give evidence towards Darwin's theory.
No, it didn't. He had posited blending, not particulate. I don't know why this is so lost upon you. He was wrong. Darwin was flat out wrong on that. He didn't know anything about genetics.
Darwin was about as right as Aristotle.
Oh, good grief.
I don't know why you're saying good grief. I still haven't heard a mechanism. I mean, seriously.
That's because.
Then what is your definition of a mechanism? I'm curious here.
How do we explain the diversity of biological life that we have here?
Again,
what
natural selection? Genetic drift, gene flow, which is migration.
That doesn't change. That doesn't create new species.
Do you know what genetic drift is?
It doesn't have to.
I have a vague. What do you mean it doesn't have?
Okay.
So a common ancestor.
So do you think that the only? So
you guys are just honestly. You can't even. You can't say
mechanism.
Natural selection is the only thing that could, and again, please, for the biologists out there, correct me. I like to put out right information. Listen, natural selection can only act upon a deleterious or beneficial mutation. Okay, but genetic drift can act upon neutral mutations. Okay, because they're random sampling of the population. So it does have an effect on the population. If you go look at genetic drift, it will change a population because of random sampling issues, even though it's dealing with neutral mutations.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's
So-
you look at the founder effect, and you get a
Founder
small
effect is a
population that goes
really
to a
good
new
example
place.
of that, man. So Chris, I mean, you were giving you these answers, and all you're doing is saying you don't have any answers. Do you know how dishonest it sounds to people listening to you?
What do you mean? I'm quote. All I
What do
did
you
was
mean?
quote. All I did was quote Francisco Ayala. That's all I did. I told you I'm no expert. I told you
No,
that.
he didn't say that there were no mechanisms. That nowhere in his quote did he say there were no mechanisms. He says we need to study these mechanisms that we have further and
No.
develop a better understanding of
I
them.
totally agree with that.
That's what he said,
Yeah.
which we all agree with. Okay, he's not saying that there
So
are
he's
no
saying we need to
mechanisms.
study them further, and you're saying
Yes,
that this is evidence that it
Science never
occurred.
stops just because we think
Yeah.
we have.
I know.
We
I
need
know-
to
I know that.
study general relativity further, and that's confirmed model 2. Hate to break it to you.
Yeah, exactly. Use it like every day, don't you? Isn't that what GPS? Is that relativity?
I'm sorry, what?
Isn't like when you use your GPS? That's
It's actually both forms of relativity. You have to be accounted for both general and special relativity, believe it or not.
okay.
Because it's obviously higher than the Earth, and it's always going.
Learn something new every
high
day.
speed. Yeah. Now, I keep forgetting though which one has the greater influence, the general or the special on that. I'm gonna have to look that up. That bugs me because I keep forgetting. You ever have one piece of knowledge that you know one's greater than the other, but you can't remember which was which, and you haven't developed a mnemonic to keep it. I gotta remember which one's greater influence. I think it's GR has a greater influence than the SR.
Well, at any rate, we have demonstrated repeatedly mechanisms that affect populations.
Yes.
Natural selection, sexual selection, genetic drift, gene flow. These are all mechanisms.
And I got one thing I want to show you that
happen within species, and it's pretty observable, and it's easy to. It's a lot of
and
evidence.
we can show that.
But that's
species.
not what you're saying. What you're saying is we all came from Luca, and these same mechanisms
why?
created these new species,
why?
and that is not no scientist I know will say that.
At what point did normal evolution break down and something else take over? At what point?
Well, it's moved on a lot since I think that I think so Darwin is garbage as Darwinism is, and no one agrees with it, obviously, which I find ironic because every time I talk to skeptics, they're always praising Darwinism.
You need to get a higher caliber of skeptics.
Remember how earlier
okay,
we talked about
I'm okay, whatever. So anyway, but no, this is news to me. So I think that I find it remarkable that you think that these Darwinian mechanisms, because they are. I mean, natural selection, gene drift, all this stuff is.
Gene drift is not Darwinian. Gene drift deals with genes. I don't know why you keep getting to. Wrap your head around this, Chris.
Hold on. Is that not a random mutation though?
Wrap your head around this.
Answer my question. Is that not a random mutation?
What a random mutation?
What?
Gene drift.
No, gene drift have to do with random sampling of a population.
Yes.
Okay, but wrap your head around this. If you mention the word Darwinism, forget genetics, because genetics was not involved in Darwinism. You don't have genes in Darwinism. And I wanted to show you something real quick on here, because I know we're getting kind of late. I'm sure Modern Hysteria has got many other things to do or wants to move on. You asked about how information is in the system, and I wanted to show you something that I had came up with. And basically, this is kind of cribbed a little bit from other sources papers that I've read with a little bit of understanding to it. But there's something called Shannon information. And this is what I gave in the presentation I did my thing, which stated clearly. The very first formula, and I don't want to explain the technicalities of this too much, but the very top formula is a very famous formula for Shannon information. Okay. And it's really not that hard to really figure out. It's basically saying, look at it. If you have two possible states, you need 1 bit information to describe it. So a coin toss, like a quarter, has 2 possible states, heads or tails. You can describe that with 1 bit of information. Okay, so 0 or 1, that's 1 bit, right? Now, if you have 4 bits of information or 2 bits of information, you can describe 4 things, right? You have 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, and 1, 1. You can apply that to DNA by using A, C, T, and G, using that formula there. So there is a way to incorporate how information comes about by changes of the nucleotides by the fact that information is in the system that's relating to Shannon information. So how does genetics and information correlate? By this. Okay. So I want to show you there's a lot more to this than I think you're realizing.
No, I'm not convinced that because of similarities in the genetic code.
Oh, for frick's sake!
Information.
Now you're just like a broken record, Chris.
I know. I may as well not say anything. So
well, I want to help you.
Look,
I know Jackson wants to help you.
No, you don't. No, you don't. From an objective observer, I am simply skeptical.
I don't think you're an objective
I
observer.
don't think, not at all.
Send me all the sources that you want to.
Okay, look. Okay, so Chris, I have an entire
Please
channel
do.
where I explain the process of evolution and I document it extensively. So if you go to my channel, you look at the
look. With all due respect,
hold on,
I'm not
Chris,
going to go to your
finish.
channel. Send me the information you want me to have, please.
Okay, are you on Twitter?
Yes.
Okay,
Chris
James,
Boyer
can
blog.
you get me his Twitter link? Shoot it over to me, and I will send him all the information he desires.
And can you also send him the paper on the human chromosome number 2 fusion? Because that's one of my more favorite papers. I don't fully understand. I'm not going to lie. It's a very complex paper, but I get the concepts, right?
If you could send it to me on Twitter, I'm on my cell phone right now.
Yeah, I'll send you a little later on. I'm one of those people, I deal with concepts. I'm not a scientist, right? I don't have the expertise the people have that write these papers, but I think I'm pretty good at the concepts. And so I understand the concepts of the human chromosome 2 fusion. And I've actually asked Dr. Tompkins for his data on it because he has this weird thing that he thinks is a DDX11L2 gene that actually has a transcription across the fusion site. But when you ask him for the reads for it, none to be had. So that to me is a really good evidence of why we have 46 chromosomes. All other members of Hominidae have 48. We would expect to find a chromosomal fusion. We found it in the 80s. We kind of knew it was there. We were able to sequence it in the 90s. We know that the sequence is there. We have relationship to all other primates because of this, or all other members of Homoidea. So it's just a fingerprint. It's like, again, going back to my ballistics scenario, all this evidence, and you're like, well, that doesn't really mean anything. It does. It means an awful lot. Anyway,
so one thing is, I did notice before the conversation was moving fast. I could have misunderstood, but I thought that there was at some point somebody said, even if we had, so basically we're fortunate to have any fossils, or at least the number that we have, because it's not an easy process to get them. And I think somebody said following that, they said, it's really just kind of a bonus or the icing on the cake in terms of evidence for evolution. I think someone said maybe something to the effect of, it's like genetics isn't enough. We wouldn't even need the fossils.
That was me.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I don't think we need the fossils either. But
okay,
right. They are a bonus. I agree.
Yeah.
Well,
I agree with that.
I might have misunderstood. So like, tell me if there's like some wire I had crossed in the conversation where I thought Chris Boyer at one time gave a quote from maybe Francisco Ayala, where for Ayala was arguing something to the effect of like the phylogenetic tree is just some sort of speculative, like it's not well evidenced among the fossils. So hold on one second. Hold on one second. Hold on. Yeah, you guys have had a lot of talk time, and so just give me one sec.
I do apologize.
Is that? I mean, I'll be fair. I'll let you explain because I'm open to the fact that I may have misinterpreted you guys. So I think Chris Boyer was pressing back, and he was saying, we have, hey, this is an actual person on your side even that's saying that the evidence from the fossils is not at all compelling. And so my thought was that, Steve, you in response said, well, we use all these different converging lines of evidence. And so, which seems though a little bit less consistent though, if I'm understanding you right, because it's like, well, wait a minute though. It's like, are you saying that we have all these different lines of evidence, including the fossil evidence? Would you concede that? So you'll stick to your guns. You'll say we do have the fossil evidence.
Yes.
Right? Okay.
I would also. Well, he asked me real quick. 2 seconds. We have the evidence. If there was never a fossil ever found, evolution would still be a confirmed model. It's not contingent upon any fossil whatsoever. The fossil is just an added bonus. I think it was the other Chris said, and I agree with that. Now,
okay.
Go ahead, go.
I think there was a bit of confusion. So what I was saying was, I think there were two conversations that were kind of mashed together in that question. My point was that genetics. I agree. Yes, genetics alone is sufficient to prove evolution. What would that mean? That wouldn't mean we would know the gradations that the populations went through from one point to another. We wouldn't know how old, this particular population is, how old this particular clade is, without fossils. That's why we have the fossils. But at the same time, we have a number, as Steve was saying, we have a number of different lines of evidence that all point to the same conclusion. So even though genetics already does the job for us, we have all these successive lines of data that point to the same conclusion. And that was the point that we were making.
I say, okay. Thank you very much. Just wanted some clarification on that. One thing that that earlier in the conversation, this had come up, and I'm confused that, so let's say this conversation initially starts and somebody says, it seems, and this isn't a criticism of the truth of the claim, but I'm trying to understand, now maybe it's just for the sake of getting the definitions down, but it seems almost unnecessary and redundant over why it would be worth pointing out when everyone obviously agrees that allele frequencies change in populations through time. And so when that comes up early and it's kind of like, hey, that's a proven thing. I mean, it seems like maybe there's like some sort of, maybe you're kind of thinking, in case there are some sort of super simple creationists out there who wouldn't even concede that. Maybe, is that why you say that?
Yeah, I get those. Dude, I kid you not. I have had creationists tell me that they don't accept speciation. Now, I have actually had Dr. Jonathan Safadi tell me that if a creationist doesn't accept speciation, he doesn't accept creationism. He doesn't understand creationism, I believe his words were. And I think he's right on that. You have to have speciation even for creationism. Matter of fact, you have to have hyper ridiculously hyper impossible levels of speciation. He's never able to explain that part, but yeah. So I have had dealt with creationists and other people that don't accept speciation. They don't know what a allele is, right? I mean, I no offense, I don't think Chris even knows what a gene is or what an allele is or a variant of a gene. And the things that we have to realize when we go into these discussions, first of all, none of us are experts besides Jackson. I'm borderline expert. He's not an accredited expert, but you have to realize is that if you're going to be attacking these types of paradigms, you need to come with a much better quiver of arrows in your arsenal. You need to come with something more than just, well, this one guy said, this one PhD said, this one person has a quote. I'm telling you right here and now, and I've said the same thing when it comes to atheists when they start quoting from a dictionary. I'm going to use the same thing. If you quote from a dictionary or use quote mines, you're never going to get far in these kind of conversations. You're going to look very, very foolish. You're going to look very, very base level. You're going to look like you really have no ability to articulate a coherent, cogent argument. And I'm telling you, Chris, as a friendly advice, stop doing it. Take some time on your own. Listen, he's going to send you some information. Take some time on your own. Learn the arguments. Learn the terminology. Once you have to resort to arguing a quote mine from somebody else that you probably don't understand in context, it is never going to go well for you. Just like I tell the atheists, you bring out a dictionary, conversation is going to be done because I might as well talk to a 2-year-old.
At least I've quoted some evolutionary biologists. I haven't heard anything
I
on your
I can
at all.
quote.
I've
And
worked
you said
for evolutionary
come on,
biologists.
really?
You said we're
worked in a
not
lab.
expert. You said no one's experts here, but when I give you experts or at least scientists, those are
honestly
not valid.
don't think I can not give you experts.
It's quote mining. When I give a quote, it's quote mining.
No. It's quote mining is when you don't understand the quote in context.
I mean,
And
Francis
I
Collins
understand.
said evolution
I
by
understand.
evolution
I understand perfectly in
ancestry is
context.
really true.
No, you
so-
don't.
You don't. Let me
He said we
clarify.
only have the vaguest idea on the genetic
Chris,
level.
let me clarify this.
You are telling me that Darwinism is dead, but Darwinism at least offers some mechanism with the explanatory power.
We just explained to you it doesn't.
Involved from getting. Yes, it does because you've offered
Sometimes
nothing
I
else.
wish
You
I
talk about
drank.
genetics.
Okay,
that doesn't explain anything.
Let me show you
You're
the
looking at similarities between organisms and looking at information in the genetic code. That does not explain anything.
Okay,
That might be evidence for common ancestry, and I already said that I would concede that. But what I want to know is how these how these species came about.
Okay, let me try something like this.
And you've offered nothing, but you criticize Darwinism by saying it's dead, but you have nothing else better.
Okay.
No one does. And in 150 years, we haven't.
Okay, so let me explain why that's completely wrong. But hang on one second. Look at these discussions people listen to, okay? And people, when they listen to these discussions, they're going to look at a couple different things. One of the reasons we haven't used any quotes is because we don't need them. We actually have read the literature. We've actually read books on this. We've actually had some college courses on it, right? I can quote a bunch of people if I need to. I have citations for a lot of things. I can go to RJ and get any citation I want for anything if I needed to. He's a walking encyclopedia, right? We don't need to resort to that unless we are trying to affirm a position that usually is under contention, right? These are not, everything we've told you is not under contention in the scientific community. If I'm arguing something that is contentious in the scientific community, then I'm more apt to give you a citation from a recognized expert in that area to help bolster or support my argumentation. But if all you have is a quote from a scientist, I don't really care because I'm not arguing with that scientist. I'm having a discussion with you.
I'm not arguing anything. I'm simply skeptical.
You are arguing. Yes, this is arguing. This is what arguing is. This is argumentation.
Well, whatever. Look, you wanted to have a discussion. You can call it whatever you want, an argument, a debate, discussion, whatever. I'm simply skeptical of how we got the biological life on a naturalistic
speciation
hypothesis. And that means nothing to me. By saying that, that means nothing to me.
Yeah.
Okay.
But when you say it's hold on, when you say it's universal, it's not. I just told you that these mechanisms, how they operate, are among debate amongst all scientists.
No, they're not.
So, they're not. Even the quote that you quoted, the quote mine that you quoted, doesn't say that.
By the way, are you?
Yes, it does. It says debate among scientists. It's out of Ayala's book, The Evolution of Life, an overview. I got it right here.
Yeah, Chris, I'm going to suggest to you a few more books.
So wait, can you
really good intro ones?
I want to hear just this because Jackson Weed asked him what the claim was that the quote was saying is a point of contention among the scholars.
Yes, absolutely.
What? I'm sorry, I didn't catch it.
Chris Boyer, if you're willing to read that quote, because you had mentioned there's a point of contention among scholars, and so Jackson Weed asked, "What was the point of contention?"
Well, I'll just read the very last portion.
One thing I'd point out is, you guys, like, if he's quoting, I mean, this is just saying, if he's quoting a scholar that is saying that this is a point of contention, like, that is not too shabby, depending on what the point of contention is, because he's giving you.
We don't know what it is.
But
I don't think he can articulate what the point of contention actually is.
And it also depends. And you should also you should also actually ask where that quote is coming from. Frankly, I don't care if you're a scholar or not. If you're not even bothering to do the research to get your book into a peer-reviewed study, doesn't mean much to me.
I agree with that, and I also got to say, look, if you're going to have a quote, you need to have the skills to interpret that quote correctly.
Oh my gosh.
No, Chris, I'm telling you here, dude.
I can do nothing. I can do nothing. I can, no matter what I say, no matter what I do, no matter who I quote.
Because you don't have the basic skill set to analyze.
And you saying that means nothing. When you saying that doesn't make it true.
Wait,
you haven't offered any. You haven't offered any mechanism that is better than Darwinism, which you said is dead, basically. You haven't offered anything.
Well, hold on. We'll come back to this. I want to press Christopher, Biblical Historical Skeptics. Just that, is there, like, I know that maybe he's not trying to publish his research in peer-reviewed avenues, but is there nothing that he could say with regard to those in the field, because he's probably got some familiarity with the field if he's got a dissertation, like if he's gone through the process of a dissertation, like is there anything he can, so there must be some things he could say. So
there definitely are, but there's a difference. I mean, when you look at his books, he's not writing scholarly books. So I don't know why people should bother using them in a scholarly discussion.
Okay.
It would be like, so for example, it would be like me saying, okay, Arn Ra's is not a scholar, but I'm still gonna take his book and flaunt it around as though it's scholarly. It's got good information in it, but it's not scholarly, and I'd rather go to the actual peer-reviewed data because that is what is actually legitimate.
But unless I'm wrong, though, Aaron Ra doesn't have he hasn't gone through the comprehensive exams to become a doctoral candidate in his field, and he doesn't have a dissertation.
No, but at the same time, I still wouldn't tout Richard Dawkins's free press book, The Greatest Show on Earth, as a scholarly book. It is a book for laymen.
That's a fair point.
Well, no, hold on a second. That's a little bit, I think, too simple, because there are things that Dawkins claims in his book. So, for example, if Dawkins said, in my experience, the vast majority of biologists agree on X, like, Dawkins is familiar with the field. Like, that, just because it's not peer reviewed, we certainly shouldn't just say it's worthless. And I know you wouldn't. Hopefully, you wouldn't go that. You couldn't.
No, I'm not saying it's worthless. But what I'm saying is that we shouldn't be holding non-scholarly work to a scholarly standard and treating it as though it is scholarly work.
Yeah, and the reason
I don't know if Christopher Boyer is doing that though.
Yeah, well, they are, because when they write these books, they're writing it for a lay audience. Okay, so it's going to be not scholarly. Okay, in that regard. Dawkins got stuff wrong. His whole gene and meme thing, not really well received any longer with the selfish gene, except if you're offended forever, right? He's like the only person that still holds to it for some reason. But people don't really go to that model. It's okay. Scientists will always come up with hypotheses that just are not right. That's how science works, right? Doesn't make him a bad scientist. Matter of fact, a good scientist gets a lot of shit wrong. That's what makes a good scientist.
Yeah, they get it wrong and they admit that they're wrong, and then they move on and try and find a better explanation. And the same as
unless they're old.
Yeah, unless they're old and grumpy, and then they're William G. Deaver. But
I mean, I still don't. I still think that if Dawkins, there are claims that Dawkins could make in his non-peer-reviewed book that you could be reasonable in accepting, depending on what they are, of course.
Yeah, well, I would not, but I'd be much more likely to accept them if you put those claims in a peer-reviewed paper.
Yeah, for sure.
And you got those reviewed by a bunch of other scholars.
Yeah,
Not in a book for laymen. Yeah, it's fine to make the claims in a book for laymen, but I'm far less likely to accept it in a book for laymen because it's not a scholarly work. Same as Lawrence Krauss's A Universe from Nothing. Wonderful book. I love this book.
I read most of it.
One of my favorite books on physics.
Good.
It's written for a layman.
Mm-hmm.
And it is not a totem of scholarly academic work.
Yep.
And no one should be treating it as such. And no one should be quoting it as such either. No one should be quoting it as an ultimate, as a scholarly authority on that work. They should be quoting his peer-reviewed papers.
And I totally agree with that. And real quick, when it comes like Dawkins, like the Dawkins scale, I think is abysmal. It's not peer-reviewed. It's not scholarly. I think it's crap.
Yeah.
Dawkins' philosophy is crap almost all around. It's
absolute crap. I would never. I would go to G-Man about philosophy before I would Dawkins at this point. I think it's just horrible. Brilliant biologist, but I can't stand the effects that he's had at philosophy because of his scale and his butchering of these things and tried to normalize atheism. I just can't stand it. He's caused nothing but confusion. And so just because he writes something in a book does not make it something that you have to adhere to in the field, right? Because it's crap.
Right. And here's one of my favorite ones actually.
Hold on. I mean, Steve was on your position, similar to your position at least, Christopher. So I just want to respond to you guys in as a group. Like, so we agree that it's not on the scholarly level of peer review. No problem. Like nobody, I didn't claim that. I don't think Chris Boyer claimed that. And so we nonetheless, though, depending on the claim, I think it is reasonable to believe in it. If a scholar who's familiar with the field says, it would be something you should weight. You should, I think, give it reasonable credence, depending on the claim. That's one thing I'm alarmed about is that when you say, no, I have significantly less probability that I would give to it if it's in this popular level book. And it's like, well, wouldn't it depend on the claim though? Because I agree that there are some silly things put in popular level books, but at the same time, if you guys want, I'll let you have the last word on this quick issue. And then if there's one last thing I wanted to bring up before we end, if that's okay, but I'll let you respond to this because
yeah. it's not that I wouldn't give it any credence. I would take the claims as claims and look at, and try and check them out. But the problem is that in a non-peer reviewed book, you can make any claim you want. And at that point, in a non-scholarly work, when you're making claims, I have no ability to really know the veracity of these things, because unlike in a scholarly peer-reviewed work, he doesn't have to back all of them up. He can just tout a claim as a fact. He can tout what he wants because he's writing for laymen.
Yeah.
And that could be his educated opinion, but that does not mean I should be taking what he says in a layman's book at all at face value, or at all without the skepticism. And I'm definitely not going to be taking it very credibly in a layman's book. Not without a bunch of peer-reviewed sources backing it up in that book. I mean, I have the same problem with it as I do with Christopher Hitchens' God is Not Great.
Yeah, the only thing I want to say on this, and I'll close it up, then Jackson have the last word, is that if somebody has something that they are saying that they have a quandary of when it comes to evolution from a book, right, from something that they wrote, I'm going to take it as a novelty. Oh, that's interesting. Great. There's nothing ever you're going to find in a book that somebody has written that's going to falsify anything, because if it did, they would be putting it as a paper, right? So yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, there's some quirks here and there. Hey, maybe I found this to be interesting about astrophysics. It's like, oh, I didn't know that they had problems with this. Oh, maybe there might be some changes in the fine structure constant. Fascinating. To me, that would be really cool if we found that in one point of space, the fine structure constant was this, and we found it somewhere else had a slight variance, because they would not expect that to be. If they found something like that, which they think they might have, which I think they've resolved, but at the time I was like, that's a cool little thing. Did it disprove the Big Bang? No. Did it have any effect on the Big Bang? No. It was just a novelty that was like interesting. But until people have something that's actually up for review, and it's in some book, novelty, interesting, but it doesn't get you anywhere, man.
Anyone can write a book. Anyone can get a book published.
Well, I promised.
Not anyone can get peer reviewed done.
Look at Mr.
I promised. I said I'd let you have the last word, so I'll stick to my promise.
Mr. Intelligent Design has 6 books. What does that tell you?
Yeah.
So, Christopher Boyer, or the rest of you, if you have anything else, any sort of topics that you'd enjoy going over, otherwise. We've had a good, lengthy, comprehensive conversation. And so if you have any ideas that you do still want to broach, like totally cool. Otherwise, we would do 5 minutes of Q&A from people who might have questions, and then wrap it up.
I'm all for going straight to Q&A, because I don't have anything more to add.
Mm-hmm.
Fair enough. Okay. Sounds like my guess is my gut says the rest of you are on the same page. So if anybody does have questions in the Q&A, would love to see them. It helps me a little bit if you just put the @modern-day-hysteria. It helps me catch them in case the conversation is flowing with questions for people in the Q&A rather than for one of the debaters, or I should say one of the discussers tonight. And if we don't have any, then we'll wrap it up, and we'll let everybody go party.
I did find one. Athena Goddess of Wisdom is asking Steve if we're going to do an after show.
Possibly. If Jack Ainstrike and Realistic Nihilist want to join, I don't mind them popping in. I have to get a few things done, and so I'm going to probably do what I did last night. I'll open the thing, and Christopher, if you want to run it, knock yourself out.
Sure,
you're all dolled up for it, right? So
yeah.
So I do have one question. This is for Chris Boyer, and they said, do you like the song? I heard it through the grapevine. I'm thinking they're being facetious.
Probably being silly, but yeah, I honestly, I'll go out and say, I think if I had to name one of the greatest male vocalists of all time, I would say hands down was Marvin Gaye.
Oh, he was good.
Gotcha.
I wouldn't contest that. So
sweet.
Well, I want to say thank you for everybody for coming on. Thank you guys for your patience as well with each other. I know that it's a little bit of a heated roller coaster once in a while, but overall, you know, could be way worse. So also, special thanks to Chris Boyer for being willing to get in the hot seat. And
yeah, can I, if you're gonna, I'm sorry to interrupt. If you're gonna close, can I say one thing before you do close it out?
one thing I just want to say before you do that is just
Yeah.
any of those who are watching, thank you to you as well. And we would love for you to subscribe as we have more discussions coming up in the future. And Chris Boyer, yeah, absolutely. What's on your mind?
Just real quick. I appreciate you having me on. I appreciate the discussion. I'm completely open to the literature. If anybody that's you know, can provide anybody in the discussion tonight that can provide any literature, you can email it to me at christopherpaulboyer@gmail.com. christopherpaulboyer@gmail.com. I'm more than happy to look at what you have. I am, from a scientific perspective, I think there's good reason to be skeptical of evolution on the Darwinian scale. And I know you guys don't really agree with Darwin per se, but I do get a lot of people that do. So when I have these types of discussions, that's what they appeal to. And the reason I think that they appeal to that is because that is the best naturalistic explanation that we have, because there just isn't anything else to explain the diversity of complex biological life that we have here. And if you do have something better than that, because everybody's here has agreed that Darwinism is basically dead, if you do have something better than that, then please, by all means, share it with me. I'll read it. I'm not opposed to that whatsoever. But what I have seen so far in the literature, and you can discredit it if you want and tell me I haven't read enough or I'm not educated enough or whatever. But I think scientists agree that there just is no explanation for how we get the biological life that we have here. And, you know, Darwinism is the best thing that we've had in 150 years. We have nothing better. It's moved on a lot since then, but we still have nothing that is going to explain, have the explanatory power and that's needed to explain this type of speciation that we see. So if you have anything, I'm more than happy to read it. But the confidence here in these mechanisms that you guys are saying as laymen, I think everybody said they're pretty much laymen, is just not what I see so far in the in the literature that I have read. So that's all I would say. Please share it with me.
So Christopher Boyer is open to those links, and given that Christopher Boyer was 1 on 3 tonight, if you guys are okay with it being the last word, and we will sign out. Thanks so much for your camaraderie tonight, and we hope all of you have a great night. Thanks for tuning in. Really appreciate it, and keep sifting out the reasonable from the unreasonable. Good night.